Jalen Carter had never felt more alone in his entire life. It wasn't the first time he'd been in a new school, but it was the first time he didn't feel the pull of excitement or curiosity. Today was different. He had to get it right this time. This wasn't just any high school, it was a whole new world for him. And as the bus pulled up in front of the gleaming, brick building of Westfield High, Jalen felt a weight settle over his chest. His grandmother used to tell him that things didn't come easy, that the world could be a hard place for someone like him. He could almost hear her voice now, in the back of his mind, "You're gonna have to fight harder than most, Jay. But don't forget your heart." Jalen grabbed his backpack a little tighter and stepped off the bus. The cold wind bit at his skin, but he barely felt it. Inside, the halls were bustling with energy, teenagers laughing, shouting, texting each other, walking with their heads held high, as if they owned the place. Jalen had never felt so out of place in his life. It wasn't just the unfamiliar faces, the strange hallways, or the thick walls of stairs that felt like daggers. It was the fact that this school was nothing like the one he'd come from in Atlanta. It was colder. Whiter. As he made his way toward the front doors, a group of students walking past him glanced over, their eyes flicking from his face to his shoes, then quickly away. His hoodie wasn't as nice as theirs. His jeans weren't as expensive. And even though Jalen had always been good at keeping his head down, even though he knew how to move through crowds without making waves, it felt like the spotlight was already on him. Maybe it was just in his head. But then, someone shoved past him. Hard. "Watch where you're going, man," a voice sneered, the words sharp and cutting. Jalen froze for a moment, feeling his heart hammering in his chest. He didn't look up, didn't respond. Just kept walking. "Yeah, you better keep walking, new kid," the voice called after him, and Jalen could feel the smirk without even turning around. It was Brett, the kid with the jawline of a movie star and the swagger of a quarterback. He was everything Jalen wasn't: loud, popular, and in charge. Jalen kept his head down as he entered the building, feeling the eyes of the students follow him. He found his locker, number 134, and shoved his things inside, not even bothering to close it. No one was waiting for him. No one was expecting him. He was just there. The bell rang, signaling the start of the first period. Jalen grabbed his schedule from his pocket and walked down the hall toward the first class. But as soon as he walked in, the murmurs started. Whispers. Glances. The teacher, Mr. Langford, barely acknowledged him as he walked to an empty desk in the back. Jalen sat down, trying not to draw attention to himself. But it was hard when everyone seemed to be looking at him. There was the sound of a basketball bouncing in the distance, somewhere down the hall. The sharp sound echoed through the air, a reminder of what he loved most, the game. The sound of the ball hitting the court, the feeling of the ball in his hands, the rhythm of his movements. He missed it already. The first class dragged on. Jalen tried to focus on the lesson, but the words didn't make sense. He wasn't sure if it was because he just wasn't getting it or because he couldn't stop thinking about the way people were looking at him. Every little sound, every glance, seemed to amplify in his mind. He was on edge. And every time Brett's laughter broke through the silence, it made his chest tighten. He wasn't sure how long he could take it. At lunch, he sat by himself. It wasn't like he didn't try to find someone to sit with. He did. But when he approached the table where a couple of kids were sitting, they looked up at him with that same, cautious look. And without a word, they turned away. Jalen felt his heart sink. He pulled out his lunch, just a sandwich, and ate it quietly, staring down at the table. "Hey," a voice said suddenly, breaking his thoughts. Jalen looked up, startled. A girl with curly hair and thick-rimmed glasses was standing in front of him. She was looking at him like she wasn't sure what to say next. I'm Emma. I saw you at tryouts yesterday," she said, as if offering a clue to who she was. Jalen blinked. Tryouts? He hadn't even realized anyone had noticed him. Yeah, I'm Jalen, he said, surprised by the sound of his own voice. You play basketball too? No, Emma said with a small smile. But I was in the gym. I saw what you did. She lowered her voice. That was amazing. Jalen looked up at her, unsure how to respond. People didn't usually compliment him, let alone notice what he could do. Most of the time, it was easier to stay in the background, to let the whispers die down and just blend in. Emma didn't wait for a response. Instead, she sat down across from him. If you ever need a friend, or help with something, let me know. I'm in video editing club. I could, help you make a highlight reel or something. Jalen didn't know what to say. He wasn't used to people being kind without expecting something in return. Thanks, he said finally, his voice barely above a whisper. Emma gave him a quick smile and walked away. The rest of the day was more of the same. The stares, the whispers, the feeling that he was always just a step behind everyone else. Jalen couldn't shake the sense that he didn't belong here. But when the final bell rang, he didn't head home immediately. Instead, he walked to the gym. The door creaked as he pushed it open, and there it was. The empty court. The sound of the basketball bouncing in his hands, the smooth wood of the floor beneath his shoes. He started dribbling, slowly at first. Then faster. His feet moved with the ball, his body flowing in rhythm with every bounce, every move. And for the first time all day, Jalen felt free. The game was all he had left. The one thing that no one could take away from him. He wasn't just Jalen Carter, the new kid. He was someone when he was on that court. A version of himself that was undeniable. His hands moved quickly, and the ball soared toward the hoop. Nothing but net. He smiled, just a little. It was a small victory. But it was enough to remind him why he kept going. Suddenly, there was a sound from the door. Someone had entered. Jalen froze, looking up. The janitor was standing there, a mop in his hand, but his eyes were fixed on Jalen. Kid's got some moves, the janitor muttered to himself, almost as if he were talking to the basketball itself. Jalen just stood there, breathless for a moment. He wasn't sure what to say. But when the janitor walked away, Jalen couldn't help but smile. Maybe this place had something to offer after all. Hit subscribe and leave a comment with where you're watching from. This story might just spark a new beginning. What's one thing that always pushes you forward, even when things get tough? Jalen had always known that life wasn't going to be easy. But the hardest part wasn't the bullies at school or the looks he got from strangers. It wasn't even the fact that he had to leave his friends, his old school, his mom, and everything he knew behind. No, the hardest part was the feeling of being in limbo, stuck between two worlds that didn't quite fit together. Back in Atlanta, Jalen was just a regular kid who loved basketball. He wasn't the best, but he was good enough to play pickup games every day after school. He lived in a tight-knit neighborhood where everyone knew each other's names, and there was always someone to pass a ball to. The smell of hot asphalt mixed with fresh-cut grass was the scent of his childhood. He'd spend hours at the local court, dribbling and shooting, feeling like he belonged. It was the only place where things made sense. But all of that changed the day his mom, Tasha Carter, was diagnosed with cancer. Jalen remembered the moment like it was yesterday. He was sitting in the living room, watching TV, when his mom came in and sat down beside him. She didn't look at him at first. Instead, she stared at the floor, her hands folded in her lap. "Jay, there's something we need to talk about," she said softly, her voice trembling in a way he had never heard before. Jalen had looked up at her then, his heart sinking. He knew something was wrong. His mom wasn't one to show weakness. "Mom?" he asked, his voice barely above a whisper. "I've got cancer, baby," she said, her voice breaking. At first, Jalen didn't understand. Cancer? What did that mean? He'd heard the word before, but it didn't make sense. His mom was healthy, strong, she never got sick. But she had. And over the next year, he watched her get weaker, her once bright eyes losing their spark as the treatments took their toll. Jalen tried to be strong for her, but it was hard. When she passed away, it felt like the world came crashing down around him. His mom had been everything to him. She was the one who always told him he could be whoever he wanted to be. She believed in him, even when he didn't believe in himself. She had taught him how to play basketball when he was just a little kid, bouncing the ball on the cracked sidewalk outside their apartment. Every time he made a shot, she'd cheer him on like he'd just won the NBA championship. After her death, Jalen didn't know what to do. His world felt hollow, like the court he used to play on had turned into a vast, empty space. It was around that time that his father, Marcus Carter, reached out. They hadn't spoken in years. Marcus had been out of the picture for as long as Jalen could remember. His dad had struggled with addiction, and after years of trying to pull himself together, he finally decided to get clean. Marcus had his demons, but he was trying. And that was the reason he called Jalen one day, asking if he could come live with him in Westfield, a small suburban town an hour outside Atlanta. It wasn't much of a choice for Jalen. He didn't have anywhere else to go. So, he packed his things and said goodbye to Atlanta, to his old life, and to the people who had always supported him. He boarded a bus with his dad's promise hanging in the air, "I'll make it right, Jalen. I'm not the man I was before." But as Jalen walked through the streets of Westfield, he realized something: no matter how hard his dad tried to change, nothing could bring back the life he had lost. He felt out of place in the quiet, pristine streets, the neatly manicured lawns, and the endless rows of white picket fences. This wasn't home. It wasn't even close. Jalen moved into his dad's small house, which was nothing like the cozy apartment he and his mom had shared in Atlanta. Marcus had cleaned up, but the place still felt like it hadn't been lived in. The air was too still, the rooms too quiet. "Here we are, Jay," his dad had said the first day. "I know it's not much, but we'll make it work." Jalen nodded, but he didn't really believe him. How could they make it work when everything he knew was thousands of miles away? They didn't talk much those first few weeks. Marcus was working long hours at a local auto shop, trying to keep his head above water. Jalen spent his days in a haze, avoiding the other kids at school and barely speaking to his dad. He missed his mom more than he cared to admit, but it wasn't just her absence that hurt, it was the loss of everything that came with her. It was during those lonely nights that Jalen turned to basketball. He would go to the local park and shoot hoops by himself, trying to find some kind of comfort in the rhythm of the game. The sound of the ball hitting the pavement, the swish of the net, it was the only thing that kept him from feeling completely lost. It was his escape. But the loneliness followed him everywhere. At school, the kids didn't really know what to make of him. Jalen had learned to keep his head down, to blend in, to avoid standing out. It was easier that way. But even then, the whispers still found their way to him. The jokes. The looks. He wasn't from here. He wasn't like them. And they let him know it every chance they got. Still, Jalen kept playing. He practiced every day at that same park, even when it was freezing cold or when the sun was setting. He'd dribble and shoot, over and over, trying to forget everything else. It wasn't enough to stop the pain, but it was a distraction. And for a while, that was all he needed. But now, standing in the halls of Westfield High, Jalen felt something stir deep inside of him. He didn't want to be invisible anymore. He didn't want to just exist in the background. His mom had always believed in him, maybe it was time for him to believe in himself, too. Maybe basketball could be more than just an escape. Maybe it could be a way out. As Jalen walked to his next class, he glanced at the gym down the hall. The door was cracked open just a little, and he could hear the sound of basketballs bouncing, sneakers squeaking on the floor. The game was calling to him, like it always did. He just had to figure out if he was ready to answer. The bell rang, signaling the start of the next class, but Jalen couldn't focus. His mind kept drifting back to the gym, where he could still hear the faint sound of basketballs bouncing, the squeak of sneakers on the court. Every time he thought about it, his chest tightened with the desire to be there, to be in the place where he felt most at home. He could picture the smooth wooden floor beneath his feet, the echo of the ball hitting the ground, the swoosh of the net when the shot went in. But that was all a dream right now. He still had to survive this school, this day, this moment. As he made his way down the hall to his next class, he tried to shake off the feeling of dread that settled in his stomach. The hallways were crowded, and the clatter of voices, lockers slamming, and footsteps echoed in his ears. Every part of it felt overwhelming. It was like he was invisible, and yet, at the same time, everyone could see him. He was just trying to get through the day without drawing too much attention to himself when he felt a sharp tap on his shoulder. "Hey, new kid," a voice said. Jalen turned around, his heart racing. It was Brett again, the kid who'd shoved him earlier in the morning. This time, Brett was flanked by two of his friends, Jake and Chris, both taller and broader than Jalen. The three of them stood with their arms crossed, blocking his path. "Yeah," Jalen said, trying to keep his voice calm. Brett gave him a half-smile, his eyes glinting with a mix of amusement and arrogance. "Heard you were at tryouts yesterday," Brett said. "You got some moves, huh?" Jalen felt a wave of heat rise in his chest. Was this it? Was he going to have to deal with them all year? He couldn't help but clench his fists, fighting the urge to lash out. I guess," Jalen stammered, unsure of how to respond. Brett leaned in a little closer. "Well, don't get too comfortable, kid. This is my school. If you think you're gonna walk in here and just take over the team, you've got another thing coming." The words hit Jalen like a punch to the gut. He knew exactly what Brett was trying to do, he was trying to intimidate him. But something inside of him snapped. Jalen wasn't used to backing down. Not anymore. Not after everything he had been through. He looked Brett square in the eyes. "I'm not here to take anything from you. I'm just here to play." For a moment, there was silence. Brett didn't move, and neither did his friends. They stared at Jalen, as if waiting for him to break. But Jalen held his ground, refusing to back down. Finally, Brett broke the silence with a laugh. "Whatever, man," he said, stepping back. "We'll see if you can back up those words when it counts." Jalen stood there for a moment, heart pounding in his chest. He had never been the confrontational type. He usually just kept his head down and tried to avoid drama. But something about Brett's words, the way he tried to push him around, ignited something inside of him. He wasn't going to let anyone walk all over him, not again. As Brett and his friends walked away, Jalen took a deep breath and continued on his way to class. He didn't feel any more confident, but something inside him had shifted. He wasn't just the new kid anymore. He wasn't going to let anyone make him feel small. That afternoon, during lunch, Jalen sat alone again. He had grown used to it by now. The empty seat across from him felt like a reminder that he didn't belong here. But this time, as he opened his lunch, he wasn't focused on the emptiness around him. His thoughts kept returning to the gym, to the basketball court, where he could escape all of this. Suddenly, someone slid into the seat across from him. Jalen looked up in surprise. It was Emma, the girl who had spoken to him earlier in the day. "Mind if I sit here?" she asked, offering a tentative smile. Jalen blinked. No. Go ahead." She sat down, pulling out her own lunch. "I figured you could use some company." Jalen wasn't sure what to say. He hadn't expected anyone to sit with him. Not after everything that had happened that morning. But there was something easy about Emma, something genuine. He hadn't realized how much he missed the feeling of not being completely alone. "I saw you at the gym earlier," she said. You've got real talent, Jalen. It was like the ball was part of you. Jalen felt a small smile tug at the corner of his lips. Thanks. I used to play all the time back in Atlanta. It's the only thing I'm good at. Emma nodded, her eyes thoughtful. I can tell. You're different when you're on the court. It's like you're finally yourself. Jalen didn't know how to respond to that. Was he really that different? He wasn't sure. But what Emma said made something click inside him. Maybe it wasn't just basketball that made him feel alive, it was the confidence he found there, the feeling of control. On the court, he didn't have to worry about fitting in. He didn't have to think about the stares or the whispers or the way people looked at him. It was just him and the game. After lunch, Jalen walked to his next class, but this time, something had changed. He felt a little lighter. He didn't know if it was because of Emma's kindness or because of the fire that had sparked inside him when he stood up to Brett, but he wasn't as worried about what people thought anymore. Maybe he couldn't change the way things were, but he could control how he responded. He could control the way he played the game. When the final bell rang, Jalen didn't rush out of the school like he usually did. Instead, he walked down the hall, towards the gym. He didn't know if he was ready to face Brett and his friends again, but he couldn't stop thinking about the court. The place where he could escape. The place where, just for a few moments, he didn't have to think about anything else. The door to the gym creaked open as Jalen stepped inside. The familiar smell of rubber, wood, and sweat hit him. The sound of basketballs bouncing filled the air. Jalen took a deep breath and walked to the court. His heart raced, not with fear, but with anticipation. He grabbed a ball and started dribbling, the rhythmic sound of the ball hitting the floor grounding him. He let the ball move with him, let his body follow the beat. It felt like coming home. For a moment, everything else faded away. The sound of basketballs echoing through the gym had become familiar to Jalen. It wasn't just the bounce of the ball or the screech of sneakers against the floor, it was the feeling of being alive, of having a purpose. Every time he stepped onto the court, something inside of him clicked. It was the one place where he didn't feel out of place, where the weight of the world seemed to melt away. For those few hours, it was just him, the game, and the rhythm of his own heartbeat. After school every day, Jalen would head straight to the gym. He would dribble, shoot, and practice his moves, even when there was no one else there to watch. But today was different. Today, the gym was filled with players. Jalen had overheard the coach talking earlier that week. The team is holding a scrimmage, Coach Harris had said, a gruff tone to his voice. I don't care if you've never played a game before. Everyone's getting a chance to show what they've got. Jalen had heard that word, scrimmage, and something deep inside him had stirred. He had been practicing alone, honing his skills, but the idea of playing with a real team, facing actual competition, it both terrified and excited him. What if he screwed up? What if the other players laughed at him? What if they saw him as just another kid from the streets, trying to act like he belonged on the court? But that afternoon, after a couple of deep breaths and a quick pep talk to himself, Jalen walked into the gym. The team was already there, warming up. Brett was dribbling the ball in one corner, and Jake and Chris were in a friendly one-on-one game on the other side. A few other guys, most of them bigger and more athletic-looking than Jalen, were scattered across the court, stretching and practicing their shots. The noise of the gym, the bouncing balls, the grunts, the sneakers squeaking, seemed to drown out everything else. Jalen felt a wave of nervousness wash over him, but he didn't let it stop him. He walked over to Coach Harris, who was standing near the bleachers, clipboard in hand. Hey, Coach, Jalen said, his voice shaky but determined. Coach Harris looked up from his clipboard. His face was stern, but his eyes softened when he saw Jalen. You here to play? Jalen nodded, swallowing hard. Yeah. I want to join the scrimmage. Coach Harris gave him a long look, sizing him up. You sure? This isn't a charity game. You'll have to show me what you've got. Jalen nodded again, trying to hide the anxiety gnawing at his stomach. He had practiced enough, he knew he could do it. He just had to believe in himself. "All right," Coach said. "Get in line. You're up next." Jalen stepped onto the court, his heart pounding in his chest. His palms were slick with sweat, and he could feel his legs shaking as he made his way to the edge of the game. Brett shot him a glance from the other side of the court, a smirk playing at the corner of his lips. Jalen's stomach churned, but he tried to ignore him. This wasn't about Brett. This was about him, about showing what he was capable of. The game started, and Jalen immediately felt out of place. The ball was passed around quickly, and the players were fast, aggressive, and skilled. He kept up as best as he could, but every time he tried to make a move, he could feel the pressure mounting. Was he doing enough? Was he moving fast enough? Was he even good enough to be here? But then, in a split second, everything changed. The ball came flying toward him. It was a perfect pass, an open shot. Without thinking, Jalen caught the ball, his fingers wrapping around it instinctively. His eyes focused on the basket, the net just waiting for him to take the shot. The noise of the gym seemed to fade into the background, and for one brief moment, he felt completely calm. He dribbled once, then twice, sizing up the defenders. Brett was close, his eyes locked on Jalen, but Jalen didn't falter. With a deep breath, he pulled up and shot. The ball sailed through the air in a perfect arc, and for a moment, it felt like time stopped. Jalen watched, his breath caught in his throat, as the ball swished through the net. The gym erupted into applause. Jalen's heart leapt in his chest, his mouth hanging open in disbelief. He had made the shot. He had actually made the shot. His teammates were shouting, clapping him on the back. Brett looked at him with something between surprise and annoyance. He had clearly expected Jalen to fail, to be just another kid who didn't belong on the court. But Jalen had just proven him wrong. For the rest of the scrimmage, Jalen's confidence grew with every move. He wasn't perfect, there were mistakes, missed shots, and moments when he stumbled. But he was there, on the court, fighting for his place. And with every play, he could feel himself getting better. By the end of the game, Jalen was out of breath, but there was a sense of pride in his chest that he hadn't felt in a long time. Coach Harris called the players together, and as the team huddled around him, Jalen couldn't help but glance over at Brett. The smirk was gone, replaced with a look of grudging respect. It was a small victory, but it was a victory nonetheless. "Good game, Jalen," Coach Harris said, giving him a brief pat on the back. "You've got some skills. Keep it up, and you'll make the team for sure." Jalen felt his heart swell with pride. It wasn't just the praise from Coach Harris, it was the fact that he had shown up, that he had stepped onto the court despite all the doubts and fears. He had proven to himself that he was more than just the kid from Atlanta. He was someone who belonged. As the team dispersed, Jalen walked off the court, still floating with excitement. He wasn't done yet. This was just the beginning. And as he looked around the gym, he realized something else. This wasn't just a game. This was his chance to rewrite the story of who he was. No longer the quiet kid who got pushed around, no longer the outsider trying to fit in. He was Jalen Carter, and he was here to play. The next few weeks passed in a blur. Jalen's life had become a strange balance of basketball practice, school, and the constant tension of walking through the halls, wondering when Brett and his friends would strike next. He had earned a spot on the team, and though it wasn't guaranteed, Coach Harris had made it clear that Jalen's skills were undeniable. But even that recognition didn't make him feel safe. The weight of being the new kid still hung around his neck, dragging him down in subtle ways. Every time Jalen stepped into the locker room, Brett's eyes followed him. Every time he walked down the hallway, he felt the sting of a whispered insult or the coldness of a shove when no one was looking. It was as if Brett was watching, waiting for the right moment to pounce. But there was something different now. The game. The way he had felt when he made that perfect shot, it had changed him. He no longer just showed up. He walked into the gym with a fire in his chest, with a belief in himself that hadn't been there before. It wasn't just the praise from Coach Harris that kept him going, it was the feeling of being in control of something, of being good at something for once. Basketball had become his escape, the one place where he could be someone other than the kid who didn't fit in. On a particularly cold Wednesday afternoon, after a hard practice, Jalen was in the locker room, changing his clothes when he heard it. That familiar voice. Well, look who's finally decided to show up. Jalen froze. It was Brett. His voice was dripping with mockery, and before Jalen could turn around, he felt a hand slam into his shoulder. Jalen spun, heart racing. Brett stood there, a smug grin on his face, flanked by Jake and Chris as usual. The three of them looked like they were having the time of their lives, like they had all the power in the world, and Jalen was just another target. "What's the matter, Carter?" Brett sneered. "You think you're some kind of big shot now that you hit one shot in a scrimmage?" Jalen's chest tightened, his breath coming in quick, shallow bursts. He was trying to stay calm, trying to focus on the reality that he had earned his place on the team. But the words cut deeper than he wanted to admit. "It's just a game, Brett," Jalen said, his voice surprisingly steady. "I'm not here to start any drama. I just want to play ball." Brett scoffed, stepping closer, his face inches from Jalen's. "Yeah. Well, don't get too comfortable. We both know who the real players are around here. Don't forget, kid, you're still the outsider. Just because you hit one lucky shot doesn't mean you belong." Jalen swallowed, resisting the urge to snap back at him. He had spent too long letting people push him around, but there was something different about this time. He wasn't just some random kid anymore. He wasn't going to back down. Not this time. Before he could respond, Coach Harris walked into the locker room, and the atmosphere shifted immediately. "All right, break it up, you three," Coach said, his voice low but commanding. "Jalen, you're fine. Brett, you're done here. Get dressed and get to the court." Brett's eyes flashed with frustration, but he turned and stormed off, his friends trailing behind him. Jalen stood there, his heart still racing, trying to calm himself down. He wasn't sure if it was the anger or the adrenaline that was making his hands shake. Coach Harris looked at him, his expression softening. "Don't let them get to you, Jalen. You've got something they don't, talent. They can't take that away from you. Just keep your head in the game." Jalen nodded, his throat tight. He wanted to believe Coach, but the truth was, it was harder than ever to ignore Brett and his friends. It felt like no matter what he did, they were always there, waiting for the moment when he would slip up, when he would give them a reason to make his life hell. The next few days were no better. At lunch, Jalen tried to sit with Emma, but even she seemed to notice the growing tension. She had been kind to him, always offering a smile or a word of encouragement. But even she couldn't ignore the way Brett and his friends kept targeting him. It wasn't just the taunts anymore. They were getting more aggressive, shoving him in the hallways, muttering insults under their breath, and every now and then, one of them would send a nasty look in his direction. It felt like being caught in a storm, unable to escape the wind and rain. But despite it all, Jalen couldn't shake the pull of the game. It was like the basketball court was the only place where he could truly breathe. It was where he felt the most like himself, where the world seemed to fade away, and it was just him and the game. The scrimmages had become a highlight of his week, but there was an underlying fear now. Fear that one day, Brett would find a way to take him down, to make sure he wasn't the one shining on that court. Jalen couldn't shake the feeling that the bullying was getting worse. Brett wasn't just messing with him anymore, he was looking for ways to break him. And then, one day after practice, everything came to a head. Jalen was tying his shoes in the locker room, trying to drown out the thoughts running through his head when he heard footsteps behind him. He turned, expecting it to be one of his teammates, but it was Brett. He was standing in the doorway, leaning against the frame, looking at Jalen with a wicked grin. "You're really something, aren't you?" Brett said, his voice low. "You think you can just waltz in here, act like you're one of us, and we'll just let it slide?" Jalen stood up, his fists clenching at his sides. He was done being intimidated. He had to be. "You've had your fun, Carter. But there's a limit to what you can do." Brett's smile faltered for a moment, his eyes narrowing as he took a step forward. "Just remember this, there's no place for people like you in this team. You're not one of us. You never will be." Jalen stared at him, trying to keep his emotions in check. Brett's words stung, but something inside Jalen refused to let them get the best of him. "I'm not here to be one of you," Jalen said, his voice steady. "I'm here to play ball. And that's all that matters." For a moment, there was silence. Brett's eyes flickered with something, anger, maybe, or frustration. But he didn't say anything else. Instead, he turned and walked out of the locker room, leaving Jalen standing there, heart pounding in his chest. He knew one thing for sure now, this wasn't just about basketball. This was about proving himself, not just on the court, but in life. No one, not even Brett, could take that away from him. The days after the locker room confrontation felt heavier than before. Jalen tried to focus on basketball, but it was hard to ignore the subtle tension between him and Brett. It was like a storm was brewing just beneath the surface, and he could feel it in every glance, in every taunt, and in every word that passed between him and the other kids. But Jalen wasn't going to let it get to him, not this time. His mind kept returning to the court. When he was there, he could almost forget everything else. Basketball was his escape, his sanctuary. The rhythm of the ball hitting the court, the sound of sneakers screeching as he made a quick turn, the thrill of the perfect shot, it was all that mattered. However, one Tuesday afternoon, everything changed. Coach Harris called the team together after practice. His face was serious, his usually relaxed demeanor replaced with a focused intensity. The gym had emptied out, and the few stragglers were chatting quietly as Coach raised his voice to get their attention. "Listen up," he began, his tone carrying authority. "We've got a big game coming up this Friday. The Riverton High team is coming to our place, and they're ranked higher than us. It's going to be a tough match. I expect every one of you to step up. We need to be sharp, focused, and prepared for anything." Jalen's heart skipped a beat. Riverton High. That was the top team in the league. The kind of team that had scouts at every game, the kind of team everyone feared. It was more than just a game, it was a chance to prove that his school had the heart, the talent, and the grit to compete with the best. Jalen had seen their players in action. They were fast, they were strong, and they didn't make mistakes. But he wasn't scared. He was excited. It was exactly the kind of challenge he had been waiting for. "Now," Coach Harris continued, "I've been watching you all closely in practice. I've been seeing some great progress, but we're going to need to step it up even more if we're going to take down Riverton. We're not just going to play defense, we're going to bring the heat." "And Jalen," Coach paused, his gaze locking with Jalen's. "I need you to step up. I know you've got the skills, but I need to see more consistency. Don't just play the game, own it." Jalen felt a surge of pride. All his hard work was paying off. He wasn't just the kid trying to fit in anymore. He was part of the team, and Coach Harris believed in him. That meant everything. "I'm ready, Coach," Jalen replied, his voice steady. Brett, standing across the room, glanced over at him. Jalen could feel the weight of his stare, but he didn't flinch. This wasn't about Brett. This wasn't even about Riverton. This was about Jalen proving to himself that he belonged on that court, no matter what anyone said. The week leading up to the game felt like an eternity. Practices were grueling. Coach Harris worked them hard, pushing them to run faster, shoot harder, and think quicker. Jalen was exhausted, his muscles aching from the relentless drills, but there was something motivating him to keep going. Every time he felt like quitting, every time his legs screamed for rest, he thought about Friday, about the game that could change everything. The tension between him and Brett grew, too. Brett seemed to be on a mission to test Jalen at every opportunity, making snide comments during practice, trying to throw him off his game. But it was different now. Jalen wasn't the same kid who had first stepped into the gym, unsure of his place. He wasn't going to let Brett get to him. On Thursday night, Jalen sat alone in his room, staring at the game schedule coach had handed out earlier in the day. Riverton High. The best team in the league. Jalen's heart raced as he thought about what he needed to do. He had to prove that he was more than just some kid from a rough neighborhood. He had to show everyone, including Brett, that he belonged. He grabbed his basketball, dribbling it slowly, focusing on the rhythm, on the feel of the ball bouncing in his hands. His mind wandered back to the last scrimmage, to the moments when he had made shots he didn't think he could. He had that spark inside him, he just had to keep it alive. The night felt long as Jalen replayed every move he had made in practice, thinking about how he could improve. How could he outsmart Riverton's defense? What if they put someone bigger on him? What if they shut him down completely? But no matter how many times the what-ifs crept into his thoughts, Jalen pushed them aside. He was ready. Game day arrived, and Jalen could feel the electric tension in the air as he walked into the gym. The stands were packed with students, teachers, and parents all buzzing with excitement. The atmosphere was different, more intense, more focused. The school's basketball team had never played a game quite like this one before. It wasn't just a game, it was a test. A test of their skill, their heart, and their ability to fight for every inch of the court. Jalen's palms were sweating as he put on his jersey. His mind was racing, his body was vibrating with nervous energy, but he wasn't going to let it overwhelm him. He had worked too hard, sacrificed too much. This was his moment. Coach Harris addressed the team before the game, his voice steady and confident. "This is what we've been working for, guys. They're a great team, but we're a better team. We have heart, we have grit, and we've got something they don't, we're a family. Play like that. Play for each other." Jalen nodded, feeling a sense of unity settle over him. It wasn't just about winning. It was about playing for the team, for the school, and for everything he had fought through to get here. He could feel the weight of the pressure, but it wasn't as heavy as it had been before. Now, it was fuel. The game began with a loud roar from the crowd as Riverton took the lead early. Their speed was impressive, and their shots were nearly perfect. Every time Jalen caught the ball, the defenders were on him in seconds. He could feel the intensity of the game building. This was no longer practice. This was the real deal. Jalen's heart was racing, but as he dribbled down the court, he felt something shift within him. This was the moment he had been waiting for. Every pass, every play was a chance to prove that he belonged. Then it happened. In the second quarter, with the score neck and neck, Jalen saw his opportunity. The ball came to him, he was open. Riverton's defense was closing in fast, but Jalen didn't hesitate. With a quick fake, he got past the defender and drove for the basket. The crowd held its breath. Jalen's heart was pounding in his ears as he jumped, the ball in his hands, the basket coming closer. He released it, and the ball soared through the air in a perfect arc. Swish! The crowd erupted. Jalen couldn't believe it. He had done it. He had scored against Riverton, in front of everyone. The moment he had worked for had arrived. The gym was electric. The hum of excitement buzzed in the air, with the entire school packed into the bleachers. Jalen had never seen the gym this full before, and the sight of so many eyes on him made his heart race. The student body was buzzing with excitement, but there was also a weight to the moment. This wasn't just a game. This was the game. Riverton High had a reputation. A reputation for being unstoppable, for dominating the league year after year. Their players were big, fast, and skilled, everything Jalen had heard about them in whispers and rumors was true. He could see the confidence in their eyes, the way they moved with ease as they warmed up. But as he looked around the gym, Jalen felt something deep inside him. Something that pushed away the nerves. Something that made him feel ready. He glanced over at his teammates, their faces a mix of anticipation and anxiety. Coach Harris had given them his pep talk, reminding them of their strengths, reminding them that they were a team, that they had heart. Now, it was up to them to prove it. Brett, standing a few feet away, gave Jalen a quick, cold look before turning his attention to the Riverton team. Jalen didn't need to look at him twice. He knew exactly what Brett was thinking, that this game wasn't about basketball for him, it was about Jalen. It was about proving that the new kid didn't belong. But Jalen wasn't going to let that affect him. Not now. Not here. The buzzer sounded, and the crowd went wild. It was time to start. The first quarter was a blur. The Riverton team came out strong, as expected, with a quick pace and sharp shooting. They scored the first few points, making it clear that they weren't here to mess around. Their star player, Marcus Jefferson, was fast, with incredible ball control. He dribbled circles around the defense, finding gaps where there seemed to be none. He made a jump shot from the three-point line that left the crowd gasping. Jalen had been assigned to guard him, and it wasn't easy. Every time Marcus had the ball, Jalen felt his heart race as he tried to predict his next move, trying to stay with him. But Jalen was determined. He was no stranger to pressure. He'd been the underdog his whole life, fighting for every bit of respect, every ounce of recognition. This game was no different. And then, in the middle of the first quarter, something changed. Jalen got the ball on a fast break after a missed shot by Riverton. He could hear the sounds of sneakers squeaking on the hardwood, the rhythm of the game filling the air as he moved down the court. Riverton's defense was quick to collapse on him, but Jalen kept his cool. He had been in situations like this before, and he knew what he had to do. As two defenders closed in on him, Jalen dribbled behind his back, then quickly passed it to Alex, who was wide open at the top of the key. Alex took the shot without hesitation, swish. The crowd erupted into cheers. Jalen grinned, his heart still racing, but for a different reason now. The game was just beginning, and they had proven something, they were in this fight. But Riverton didn't back down. They came back with a vengeance, pushing hard on offense and playing tight defense. They were fast, and their communication was seamless. They made another basket, and then another, slowly pulling ahead. Jalen could feel the pressure building. This wasn't just about winning a game. This was about proving to himself, and to everyone else, that he belonged. As the game wore on, Jalen's nerves began to settle. The rhythm of the game became more familiar, and with each dribble, each pass, each shot, he could feel himself growing more confident. But it wasn't just about the ball. It was about the team. Coach Harris had drilled it into their heads, teamwork. If they were going to win, it wouldn't be because one player stood out. It would be because they played together as one. And for the first time, Jalen felt what that meant. Every pass, every screen, every movement on the court was a conversation, a silent agreement to do whatever it took to win. By the second half, the score was still close. Riverton had managed to hold on to a small lead, but it was anyone's game. The tension in the gym was palpable. The players were exhausted, but they pushed through, determined to give everything they had. Jalen could feel his legs burning, his muscles screaming for relief, but he didn't stop. He couldn't. He had made a promise to himself, to his team. This game meant more than just basketball. It was about who he was, who he had become. And then, in the third quarter, the moment came. Jalen had the ball again, this time near the baseline. Riverton's defense was closing in fast, and he knew he had only a few seconds to make a decision. He could try to pass it, but the defense was too tight. He could go for the layup, but the defender was right in front of him. And then he saw it. A gap. A small window of opportunity. Without thinking, Jalen took a deep breath and drove to the basket. He faked left, then spun right. The defender tried to block him, but Jalen was already in the air, releasing the ball just in time. It felt like everything slowed down as the ball soared through the air. For a split second, Jalen thought it might miss. But then, the ball hit the backboard with a soft thud and bounced into the hoop. Swish. The crowd went wild. Jalen's teammates rushed to congratulate him, but it was more than just the basket. It was the culmination of everything he had worked for. The respect, the confidence, the skill, it had all come together in that one perfect moment. The game was far from over, but that shot was a turning point. Jalen had not only proven that he could keep up with the best, but he had also earned his place among them. As the final buzzer echoed through the gym, the score was tied. It had been a hard-fought battle, but it wasn't over yet. Both teams were exhausted, but everyone knew that the last few minutes would decide everything. Jalen stood in front of the basket, his chest heaving as he wiped the sweat from his brow. He looked over at Brett, who was staring back at him with a look of grudging respect. Jalen wasn't thinking about the final score. He wasn't thinking about whether they would win or lose. He was thinking about how far he had come. How much he had grown, and how much he had earned. And now, all he had to do was finish what he started. The gym was filled with a deafening roar as the buzzer signaled the start of the final quarter. The score was tied, 72-72. Every single person in the stands, every single player on the court, knew this was it. This was the moment. The final 12 minutes would decide everything. Jalen's legs felt like lead. The constant sprinting, the jumping, the intense focus, his body was telling him to slow down, to catch his breath. But he couldn't afford to. Not now. Not with everything on the line. He wiped his face with the back of his jersey, glancing at Coach Harris, who stood on the sideline, his eyes sharp, calculating every movement of the game. Coach's voice echoed in Jalen's mind, "We're not just playing to win, we're playing for respect. Play smart, play tough, and play together." Jalen nodded to himself, pushing all doubts aside. He had to stay focused. It wasn't just about scoring points anymore. It was about playing as a team, working together, and trusting one another. "Let's go," he muttered under his breath, psyching himself up for the final stretch. The game resumed with both teams ready to give it their all. Riverton came out with their usual aggressive style. Marcus Jefferson, the Riverton star, had been a constant threat all game. He was fast, and his shot was near flawless. Jalen had managed to keep him in check for most of the game, but he knew that if Marcus caught fire, it could be over in an instant. Riverton quickly scored, pushing ahead by 2 points. The crowd erupted into cheers, and the Riverton players flexed their muscles, their energy high. Jalen's heart pounded harder. But he didn't let that affect him. He couldn't. This was the moment he had been working for his entire life. Alex, his teammate, passed him the ball with a look of determination. Jalen took a deep breath, his fingers curling around the ball. As he dribbled, he noticed Brett standing just a few feet away. Brett had been playing like a man possessed, and Jalen could feel the intensity radiating from him. They weren't friends, not yet, but something was changing between them. Something had shifted when Jalen made that crucial shot in the third quarter. They were teammates now, whether they liked it or not. Jalen broke away from his defender and found a clear lane toward the basket. His eyes locked onto the hoop. He could feel the weight of the moment on his shoulders, the eyes of the entire school on him. The pressure could have crushed him, but instead, it fueled him. He took the shot. The ball left his hands and soared through the air. Time seemed to slow down. Every eye in the gym was on him, watching as the ball glided toward the basket. Swish. The crowd erupted. Jalen let out a breath he didn't realize he'd been holding. The game was tied again. The tension was palpable. But Jalen didn't have time to enjoy the moment. Riverton was already on the attack again, and Marcus was on a mission. He moved quickly down the court, dodging defenders with ease. As he neared the three-point line, Jalen knew it was coming. He couldn't let Marcus make that shot. Jalen sprinted, meeting Marcus at the three-point arc. The tension between them was almost electric. Marcus took the shot, Jalen jumped to contest it, but it was too late. Bang! The ball hit the back of the rim and bounced out. Jalen exhaled in relief, but Riverton center, a massive player named Jake Thompson, grabbed the rebound. He quickly put it back up for an easy 2 points, putting Riverton ahead once more. The gym buzzed with excitement, but Jalen wasn't discouraged. They were still in this. Jalen looked at his teammates, their faces tired but determined. Brett, surprisingly, was the one who called the next play. The rivalry between him and Jalen was still there, but something in the way Brett spoke, his voice calm and commanding, told Jalen that Brett was ready to play for the team, not just for himself. "We need to move faster. Set up a pick and roll." "Jalen, you're the point guard," Brett said. Jalen nodded. This was the moment where everything could change. The strategy was simple but effective: fast movement, quick passes, and exploiting any weakness in the defense. Jalen knew this game wasn't going to be decided by one shot. It was going to be about execution, about making sure every single possession counted. On the next play, Alex set a perfect screen, and Jalen was free. He pushed the ball forward, eyes scanning for his next move. He saw the opening. The Riverton defense was collapsing on him, leaving Brett open for a three-pointer. Jalen didn't hesitate. He made the pass, and Brett took the shot. The ball soared. Swish. It was good. The crowd went wild. Jalen's heart raced. They were ahead by 1 point now, 79-78, with just under 3 minutes left in the game. This was it. This was the chance. The next few minutes were the most intense of Jalen's life. Riverton came back quickly with a fast break, Marcus weaving through defenders and making an impossible pass to Jake Thompson, who dunked it with power. Riverton regained the lead, 80-79. Jalen and his teammates weren't backing down, though. They kept fighting. With 2 minutes left, Jalen got the ball at the top of the key. His eyes darted from one defender to the next, trying to read their movements. He could hear the coach shouting instructions from the sidelines, but his focus was razor-sharp. He took a step forward, faked a pass to the left, then spun to the right. His defender bit on the fake, and Jalen had a clear lane to the basket. He drove hard, jumping for the layup. Block. Jake Thompson was there. His massive hand swatted the ball out of the air with ease. The crowd groaned in disappointment. But Jalen wasn't done yet. He hit the ground hard but quickly got back up, tracking the ball. Riverton's players scrambled for the rebound, but Jalen was faster. He dove, grabbing the ball and throwing it back toward his team. It was a chaotic scramble, but Alex was there. He took the ball, moved it to the corner, and found an open shot. Swish. Another three-pointer. Jalen's heart was pounding, but he couldn't stop now. They were ahead, 82-80, but there was still time. The game wasn't over. As the final seconds ticked away, Riverton pushed forward, but the defense was locked down. Marcus tried to take a shot from the three-point line as the clock neared 0, but Jalen was right there, contesting the shot. The ball flew, spinning in the air. Clank. The buzzer sounded. The game was over. They had won. The gym exploded in cheers as Jalen and his teammates collapsed to the floor in exhaustion. Coach Harris ran onto the court, his face beaming with pride. The underdogs had done it. They had beaten Riverton High, the team everyone thought was invincible. Jalen stood up, a feeling of disbelief washing over him. He looked around at his teammates, at the fans in the stands, and then at Brett. There was no rivalry anymore, no tension. Just two players, two teammates, standing side by side after an incredible victory. It was a moment he would never forget. The gym was still buzzing with energy long after the final buzzer had sounded. Riverton High's players were gathered in a corner, visibly deflated but trying to hold on to their pride. Jalen's teammates surrounded him, their faces lit up with excitement and disbelief. "We did it! We really did it!" Alex shouted, pumping his fist in the air. Jalen couldn't wipe the grin off his face. His heart was still racing from the game's intensity, and the adrenaline hadn't worn off yet. He had never imagined he'd be standing there, in the middle of a victorious team, after taking down a powerhouse like Riverton. Coach Harris walked over, his expression a mix of pride and relief. "Great game, everyone. You fought hard, played together, and earned this victory. Remember, it's not just about the scoreboard. It's about showing up for each other, no matter what." Jalen nodded, his eyes scanning his teammates. For the first time, he felt like he truly belonged. This was more than just basketball, it was about the bond they'd formed through the struggles, the wins, and the losses. It was about finding strength in one another. As the gym emptied out, Jalen sat on the bleachers, slowly catching his breath. The sound of footsteps approached, and he turned to see Brett walking toward him, his face unusually serious. "Nice game," Brett said, his voice quieter than usual. Jalen was taken aback. Brett had never really acknowledged him like this before, especially not after such an intense game. There was still some tension between them, but Jalen could sense the shift in Brett's demeanor. "Thanks," Jalen replied, his voice steady. "You played well, too." Brett hesitated for a moment, then sat down next to him. The silence between them wasn't uncomfortable, but it was loaded with the weight of unspoken words. Finally, Brett spoke again. "I was wrong," he said, his gaze fixed on the floor. "I didn't think you'd be able to handle the pressure, but you showed up. You proved me wrong." Jalen's heart skipped a beat. He had never expected this kind of acknowledgement from Brett. "I'm just doing my part," he said. "We're a team. We win together." Brett nodded slowly, his eyes finally meeting Jalen's. "Yeah, we are. I guess, maybe we could be friends, too." The words were simple, but they felt like a monumental shift. Jalen had no idea what it would mean for their relationship moving forward, but he knew that, in that moment, something had changed. Not just for them, but for everyone on the team. The next day at school was a whirlwind. Jalen had barely made it through the doors when he felt the weight of his teammates' gazes on him. But this time, it was different. There were no whispers of doubt, no sideways glances. People were talking to him, acknowledging him, even congratulating him. He could hear the whispers in the halls, but this time they were different. They weren't about the kid who didn't belong. They were about the kid who just beat Riverton High in one of the most unforgettable games of the season. "Man, Jalen, that shot in the third quarter. Unbelievable," one of the seniors called out to him as he passed by. Another classmate, who had barely acknowledged Jalen before, gave him a high five. "You're the real deal, dude. That's some next-level stuff." Jalen felt a sense of warmth spread through him as he smiled in return. He hadn't expected things to change overnight, but here he was, receiving the recognition he had always dreamed of. But amidst the celebration, Jalen knew that there was still work to be done. This win was just the beginning. There was still a long road ahead, and he had to keep pushing forward. At lunch, Jalen sat with his usual group of friends, though today it felt like he was surrounded by a sea of new faces. People who had never given him the time of day were now flocking around him, asking about the game, about his experience on the court. Brett had already joined the group, and to Jalen's surprise, he was laughing along with everyone else. They joked and shared stories from the game, and for once, Jalen didn't feel like the outsider. As they finished eating, a few of the other players from the team approached. "Yo, Jalen," one of them said, a grin plastered on his face. We're heading to the courts after school. You in? Jalen hesitated for a moment. He wasn't sure if this was a one-time thing or if they genuinely wanted him to be a part of their circle. But then he saw the looks on their faces, the same look he had seen on the court after the game, respect. Yeah, I'm in, Jalen replied with a confident smile. Later that afternoon, Jalen walked to the outdoor courts near the school. The sun was beginning to set, casting a golden glow over everything. He wasn't used to this, being invited to hang out with the team outside of school. But as he stepped onto the court, the sound of basketballs bouncing and sneakers screeching filled the air. It was a familiar sound, one that had always been comforting to him. Brett was already there, shooting hoops. He waved at Jalen as he approached. "We've got a game going," he said, tossing the ball to him. "Ready to show us what you've got?" Jalen grinned, taking the ball. He felt the familiar weight in his hands, and for a second, everything else faded away. It was just him, the court, and his teammates. He dribbled the ball once, twice, and then took a jump shot. The ball arced perfectly through the air, swishing through the net with ease. The team cheered, and Jalen's smile widened. This was his element. This was where he felt most alive. For the first time in a long time, Jalen didn't feel the weight of judgment or expectations. He wasn't trying to prove anything to anyone. He was just playing the game he loved, with teammates who respected him. As the game continued, Jalen realized that this moment, this feeling of being accepted, was something he had always craved. He wasn't just the kid who had to fight for his place anymore. He was part of something. He was part of a team. And that was only the beginning. As the evening wore on and the last of the daylight faded, Jalen sat on the edge of the court, his heart full. He looked around at his teammates, at the friends he had made, and couldn't help but feel a sense of belonging he had never known before. He had fought for this. Fought for respect, for a place to call his own. And now, for the first time, he felt like he had found it. Things had changed, and it felt like everything was just beginning. The next few weeks flew by in a blur. After the game against Riverton, Jalen's life at school was different. The whispers in the hallways had changed from judgment to admiration. Teachers greeted him with a new respect, and even the kids who had once mocked him now treated him like one of their own. Basketball wasn't just a game anymore. It was the key to unlocking a part of his life he never thought he'd have access to, acceptance. He was no longer the kid who had to prove himself, he was the kid who had earned respect, on and off the court. It was a strange feeling, but it was one he was starting to enjoy. But not everything was as perfect as it seemed. Jalen could sense something was off. It wasn't anything obvious, but there was a distance that had started to creep in, particularly with Brett. The easy camaraderie they'd shared after the game had gradually turned into an awkward silence between them. Brett would avoid eye contact during practice, and whenever Jalen spoke up in class or during group activities, Brett would seem to zone out, like he was somewhere else. Jalen wasn't sure what had changed. He didn't want to make assumptions, but there was an uneasy tension between them that hadn't been there before. Every time Jalen tried to reach out, Brett would give short, clipped answers or turn his focus elsewhere. It wasn't until one afternoon after practice that Jalen finally understood why. The team was finishing up their drills, the gym filled with the familiar sound of sneakers on the hardwood floor and the bounce of basketballs. Jalen wiped the sweat from his brow and walked over to the water fountain, hoping to catch his breath before heading to the locker room. He had barely taken a sip when he heard voices behind him. At first, it was just the usual banter between the players, but then Jalen heard his name. "You hear about Jalen?" a voice said, low but not low enough to escape Jalen's ears. Jalen froze, his throat tightening. He turned slightly, keeping his back to the group, but straining to listen. "No way. He's good at basketball, but I heard he's been putting on a show for the coaches. Trying to act like he's got it all together. Yeah, man, I don't know. Something feels off about him. He's been hanging out with Brett a lot, right?" And Brett's usually not that nice to people, so, there has to be something going on there. The conversation felt like a punch to the gut. Jalen's hand tightened around the water bottle as he tried to steady himself. His pulse raced. This wasn't just about his skills anymore, it was about something deeper, something personal. The fact that Brett was involved made everything more complicated. He couldn't believe what he was hearing. He tried to push the thoughts away, but the words continued to echo in his mind. Jalen. Yeah, he's good, but people don't really know him, you know, another voice chimed in. Jalen didn't want to listen anymore. He didn't want to hear this. But his feet were rooted to the spot, and his mind raced, trying to piece together the implications of what he'd just overheard. Was this how people saw him? Was he just a kid who was trying to make a name for himself, someone who was pretending to be something he wasn't? The next few minutes were a blur. Jalen didn't know how he managed to finish practice. He could barely focus on the drills. All he could think about was the conversation he'd just overheard. After practice, the team filtered out of the locker room, but Jalen lingered behind. He needed to talk to Brett, to confront him about what was going on. This tension had to end. He couldn't keep pretending everything was fine when he felt like things were falling apart. Jalen found Brett sitting on the bleachers, tying his shoes. He hesitated for a moment, unsure of how to approach the situation. Brett, Jalen said, his voice a little shaky but determined. Brett looked up, his expression unreadable. What's up? Jalen's heart thudded in his chest. He couldn't hold it in anymore. I heard what you've been saying behind my back. Brett's face tightened. He didn't say anything for a moment, and Jalen could see the wheels turning in his mind, weighing his next words carefully. Look, man, Brett said, finally meeting his eyes, it's not what you think. Jalen took a step closer. Then what is it, Brett? Because I don't get it. 1 minute, we're fine, and the next, he stopped, shaking his head. You're avoiding me, acting like I don't belong, like I'm just pretending to be part of the team. Brett sighed, running a hand through his hair. It's not like that. It's just. I don't know, man. I've got a lot of stuff going on at home, and I guess I've been acting weird. Jalen frowned. What does that have to do with me? Brett shifted uncomfortably on the bench, his gaze flickering toward the floor. I didn't want to say anything, but I guess I owe you an explanation. I've been jealous, Jalen. Jealous of you. Of how you just fit in. Everyone's been talking about you, your game, and yeah, it's great, but I've been feeling like I'm losing my place. I've been on the team longer, and suddenly, it's like everything's shifting. I don't know how to deal with it. Jalen blinked, trying to process Brett's words. The revelation hit him harder than he expected. Jealous? Jalen repeated, his voice low. You've been jealous of me? Brett looked up, his eyes filled with a mix of guilt and frustration. Yeah. I've been that guy who can't handle things when they start changing. And I guess I thought if I kept pushing you away, it would stop all this. I didn't want you to think you were taking my spot, or that you were more important than me. I'm not proud of it. Jalen sat down next to Brett, the weight of his words sinking in. He had never imagined that Brett, of all people, would feel this way. The last few weeks had been a roller coaster, and this was a revelation he hadn't seen coming. I don't want your spot, Brett, Jalen said after a long pause. I'm not trying to take anything from you. I just want to be part of the team. I don't want to be the kid who's looked at as the new guy or the outsider. I just want to play ball, and have people respect me for who I am, not because I'm some savior for the team. Brett let out a long breath, running his fingers through his hair again. I know, man. And I'm sorry. I've been a jerk about it. I shouldn't have treated you like that. I should have talked to you instead of letting it all fester. Jalen nodded. It's okay. But we need to fix this. You and me. We're a team, right? Brett met his eyes, and for the first time in weeks, Jalen saw the old Brett, the guy who had played with him as a teammate, not an adversary. Yeah. We are. And I'll do whatever it takes to make it right. The conversation left Jalen feeling a sense of relief. Things weren't perfect, but for the first time in a while, he felt like he had truly uncovered the truth. He and Brett had work to do, but they were both willing to put in the effort. As Jalen left the gym that day, he realized something important: acceptance didn't just come from the outside. It came from being honest with yourself and with the people around you. And if he was going to be a part of this team, he needed to face the truth, no matter how hard it was. The morning after Jalen and Brett's conversation, there was a strange, quiet kind of understanding between them. The tension had melted, replaced with the kind of camaraderie that only came from raw honesty. Brett wasn't avoiding Jalen anymore. In fact, he was trying to make up for lost time, clapping Jalen on the back and making jokes like old times. It felt good, almost like nothing had ever changed. Almost. Jalen didn't have to worry about Brett anymore. But there was something else nagging at him now, something he hadn't noticed before. The world outside of basketball. As he walked to class that morning, Jalen passed by the cafeteria, where he spotted a familiar face sitting alone at a table. It was Alex, his teammate. He had always been friendly, cracking jokes, always surrounded by people. But today, Alex looked different. His usual confident grin was replaced with a somber expression, and his eyes seemed distant. He didn't notice Jalen at first, his head down, poking at his breakfast without much interest. Jalen felt a wave of concern. Something was off with Alex, and Jalen had always been the type to step up when he saw someone struggling. Despite everything that had been going on with Brett, he knew this wasn't just about basketball. This was about being there for people. Real people. Without thinking, Jalen changed direction and walked toward Alex. "Hey, man," Jalen said softly, taking a seat across from him. "You good?" Alex looked up, startled for a moment, before his eyes softened. "Oh, hey Jalen." "Yeah. I'm alright." Jalen raised an eyebrow. "You sure? You don't look alright." Alex sighed and put his fork down, rubbing his temples. "It's just, a lot going on. At home, school. It's like everything is piling up, and I don't know how to handle it." Jalen leaned forward, his concern deepening. "You want to talk about it?" For a moment, Alex just sat there in silence, his gaze distant. Then, slowly, he nodded. I guess it's been a lot lately. My dad's been out of work for months now, and it's been hard at home. My mom's stressed all the time, and I just feel like I'm failing. I can't even concentrate on anything anymore. Not school, not basketball, nothing." Jalen sat back, taking a moment to process. He had no idea Alex was dealing with something like that. On the court, Alex was always the one who held the team together, cracking jokes, keeping the mood light. He was the one everyone leaned on. But now, sitting across from him, Jalen could see the cracks, see how much Alex was really carrying. "Man, I didn't know," Jalen said quietly. "I'm sorry you're going through all that. I get how hard it can be to keep it together when everything is falling apart." Alex let out a shaky laugh, but it wasn't a happy one. "Yeah, well, I've been trying to keep the smile on, you know. I don't want people to see me as weak. But I can't do it alone." Jalen felt a lump form in his throat. He could see so much of himself in Alex, hiding his struggles behind a mask, pretending everything was fine when it wasn't. He knew how that felt. "Look," Jalen said, his voice firm yet gentle, "you don't have to do this alone. I'm here, okay? You don't have to hide behind a smile for me. If you need to talk, if you need to get away from it all, I'm always around. Just, don't keep it all in. We're a team, man. On and off the court." Alex looked at him, his eyes filled with a mix of surprise and gratitude. You really mean that? Jalen nodded. Of course. I know what it's like to feel like you're carrying everything by yourself. But you don't have to. I've got your back, no matter what. Alex swallowed hard, his face softening as the weight of his emotions seemed to break through his usual mask. Thanks, Jalen. I don't know what I'd do without the team, without you guys. I just don't want to be a burden, you know. Jalen smiled, feeling a warmth spread through him. That's what we're here for. No one's a burden, not with friends like us. We're in this together. For the first time in days, Alex smiled back, a genuine smile that reached his eyes. You're right. I appreciate it, man. Seriously. The rest of the day passed by in a blur of classes and interactions, but Jalen couldn't shake the conversation he'd had with Alex. It felt good to be there for someone else, to share that kind of support. He knew firsthand how much it helped to have someone you could lean on when life was weighing heavy. And he was determined to be that person for his teammates, not just on the court, but in every way possible. Later that evening, as Jalen practiced his shots alone in the gym, he found himself thinking about what Alex had said. The pressure of life outside of basketball was real, and he wasn't the only one who was struggling. But it also reminded him how important it was to stay grounded, to keep his focus not just on winning games, but on the relationships that mattered most. Basketball was just a game. But the people he played with, the teammates he supported, and the friends he made, that was real. That was what made everything worth it. The next practice was different. There was a new energy in the gym. It wasn't just the usual intensity of a game day prep. It was something deeper, something more meaningful. When Jalen entered the gym, he saw Alex already there, shooting hoops alone, his posture more relaxed than usual. As Jalen walked toward him, Alex turned and gave him a nod, a silent acknowledgement of the bond they had just started to build. Feeling better? Jalen asked, tossing him a basketball. Alex smiled, catching it with ease. Yeah, I'm good. I just needed to get out of my own head for a bit. Jalen clapped him on the back. That's what friends are for. Let's get some shots in. For the next hour, they practiced together, pushing each other to be better, but also sharing laughs, the kind of laughs that weren't just about basketball. They were about life. About being there for each other, no matter what. By the time practice ended, Jalen could see a change in Alex. It wasn't just in his game. It was in his spirit. He was more present, more himself. The mask had finally come off, and for the first time in a long while, Alex looked like he wasn't carrying the weight of the world on his shoulders. He looked like he was finally beginning to feel like he belonged, like he didn't have to be perfect, that it was okay to not have everything figured out. As Jalen walked home that evening, he felt lighter, too. He had always known the power of teamwork on the court. But today, he realized that the most important part of being a team wasn't just about winning. It was about showing up for each other, not just when the ball was in play, but when life itself was the game. And in that moment, Jalen knew that, no matter what happened in the future, he had the strength to face it, not alone, but with his team. Hit subscribe and leave a comment with where you're watching from. This story might just spark a new beginning. What's one thing that always pushes you forward, even when things get tough? The weeks leading up to the biggest game of the season were a whirlwind. The entire school was buzzing about the upcoming match between their high school team and the rival school, Westbrook High. The gym was packed at every practice, and the air was thick with anticipation. Everyone had their eyes on the championship, but it wasn't just about basketball anymore. This game felt bigger. It felt personal. Jalen could sense it from his teammates. Everyone had been pushing themselves harder than ever, determined to show not just their skills but their resilience. They had something to prove, not only to Westbrook, but to themselves. Jalen could feel the weight of it on his shoulders, too. As he walked through the school hallways that morning, he could hear students talking about the game in every classroom, in the cafeteria, even in the bathrooms. It was all anyone could talk about. "Jalen, you ready for tonight's game?" asked Max, one of the guys who had been on the team for years, but had never really noticed Jalen before he started playing. Now, they were teammates, friends, and they had developed a strong bond over the past few months. Jalen smiled. "Yeah, I've been ready for this my whole life." Max laughed, punching Jalen lightly on the shoulder. "I can tell. Just make sure to save some energy for the game, man. You've been on fire lately." "I'm not gonna stop until that trophy's ours," Jalen replied, his voice filled with determination. It wasn't just about winning, though. Jalen had learned that much from the past months. It was about everything that had led him to this point, the challenges, the struggles, and the friendships. It was about proving that he belonged here. Proving to himself that no matter what had happened in the past, no matter how hard things got, he was strong enough to rise above it. Later that evening, the gym at Westbrook High was packed to the brim with fans. The buzz was electric, a palpable energy that sent adrenaline coursing through Jalen's veins as he laced up his sneakers. The bleachers were filled with students and parents from both schools, all eager to witness the showdown that had been building for months. As Jalen stood by the locker room, his teammates gathered around him, getting ready for the warm-up. Coach Daniels stood in front of them, giving a brief pep talk. "Listen up," Coach Daniels began, his voice steady and authoritative. "This is the moment we've been working for. We've come so far, and tonight, it's all on the line. You've all got what it takes to win this game. Trust in each other, trust in the work you've put in, and trust in yourselves. This is more than just a game. This is about proving that we're a team that can overcome anything. Let's do this." The room was silent for a moment, each player lost in their own thoughts. Jalen's mind was racing. He thought of everything that had brought him here, the bullying, the doubts, the triumphs, and the people who had supported him along the way. His teammates, his friends, even the rival fans, tonight was their night to shine. Brett, who had been quieter than usual in the past few days, slapped Jalen on the back and gave him a wink. "Let's show them what we've got, man." Jalen nodded, feeling the weight of his teammates' trust in him. "Let's go win this thing." The game started off with the typical energy of a high school championship, fast-paced, high-stakes, and filled with tension. Westbrook High came out swinging, their star player, Danny Williams, putting up an early three-pointer that made the crowd erupt. The Riverton fans responded, their cheers just as loud, as their team fought to catch up. Jalen's focus was sharp, his eyes scanning the court as he moved fluidly through the plays. He'd trained for this moment, and now it was time to show everyone what he was made of. He could feel Brett's eyes on him as they worked together on defense, sliding across the court in sync. The trust they had built in each other over the last few weeks was paying off. Every pass, every defensive move was calculated, and Jalen was playing with the kind of confidence that only came from knowing you had a place, that you were meant to be there. But as the game went on, Jalen could see the pressure mounting. The tension in the gym was thick, with each point feeling more critical than the last. The score was neck and neck, and Westbrook was playing harder than ever. Danny was on fire, sinking shot after shot, and for a moment, Jalen felt his grip on the game slipping. With only minutes left in the fourth quarter, Riverton was down by 3. The clock was ticking down, and the crowd was on the edge of their seats. Jalen could feel his heart pounding in his chest, his mind racing. This was the moment he had been waiting for, the final chance to prove himself, not just to his teammates, but to everyone who had doubted him. Coach Daniels called for a timeout. The team huddled up, sweat dripping down their faces as they caught their breath. "All right, Jalen, you know what we need," Coach Daniels said, his voice steady but filled with urgency. "This is your time. Take control of the ball. We'll follow your lead." Jalen nodded, his stomach in knots. This was it. No turning back now. As the game resumed, Jalen brought the ball up the court, his eyes locked on the basket. His feet felt light as he dribbled, weaving through defenders with practiced precision. The crowd was a blur, their cheers and boos a distant hum as everything else fell away. All that mattered was the ball, the basket, and the clock. With only seconds left, Jalen saw an opening. He made a quick move, spinning past one defender, then another. He was just outside the three-point arc. The crowd held its breath. He knew this shot could make or break the game. Jalen took a deep breath, squaring his shoulders, and launched the ball into the air. Time seemed to slow. The ball arced toward the hoop, the sound of the buzzer ringing in the distance. For a split second, Jalen held his breath, praying the shot would land. Then, with a soft swish, the ball sailed through the net. The gym erupted into chaos. The Riverton team went wild, players rushing toward Jalen in celebration. His heart pounded in his chest as his teammates lifted him into the air, shouting and cheering. The scoreboard flashed the final score, Riverton 69, Westbrook 67. Jalen couldn't help but laugh, a feeling of pure exhilaration washing over him. This wasn't just a victory on the scoreboard. It was the culmination of everything he had worked for, the struggles, the victories, and the friendships. This was his moment. As Jalen walked off the court, the weight of the win finally settled in. The feeling was surreal. He had done it. He had helped his team win the game, but more than that, he had proven something to himself. He wasn't just the kid who had been bullied. He wasn't just the new guy. He was Jalen Carter, a player who belonged. And tonight, he had shown everyone that. The sound of the buzzer ringing out still echoed in Jalen's mind as he sat in the locker room, his head spinning with the rush of emotions. The game had ended, but it felt like the moment would never truly be over. He had made the shot. He had led his team to victory. But more than that, he had shown the world, and more importantly, himself, that he was capable of so much more than he had ever thought possible. Jalen stood in front of his locker, staring at his reflection in the mirror. His jersey was soaked in sweat, his muscles aching, but he couldn't wipe the smile off his face. He was a hero for the night. A champion. Jalen, came a voice from behind him, snapping him out of his thoughts. He turned around to see Brett and the rest of the team entering the locker room, their faces lit up with excitement. Brett slapped Jalen on the back, grinning from ear to ear. "Dude, that shot!" Brett exclaimed. "I can't believe you pulled that off. You saved us, man." Jalen smiled, feeling a rush of pride wash over him. "It was nothing. We all played our part, right?" The team gathered around, each player congratulating Jalen in their own way, some with high fives, others with words of appreciation. Alex was one of the last to approach, his expression softer than usual. He gave Jalen a quick hug, clapping him on the back. "You're the reason we won this," Alex said, his voice sincere. "I don't think anyone else could have handled that pressure like you did. You've been carrying us all season, but tonight, man, you showed everyone what you're made of." Jalen was overwhelmed by the outpouring of love from his teammates. It felt different this time. It wasn't just a victory in basketball, it was a victory in life. For the first time, he felt truly seen. Truly appreciated. Not just as the kid with the skills, but as someone who had earned the respect of those around him. The next morning at school, Jalen walked through the hallways with a newfound sense of confidence. Everyone seemed to look at him differently. He had always been the quiet kid, the one who sat in the back, avoided attention, and kept to himself. But now, it was different. His teammates greeted him with nods and smiles. Even some of the students who had never paid him much attention before were stopping him in the halls to offer congratulations. "Hey, man, that shot last night was insane," one of his classmates, Kyle, said as he walked past Jalen. "Yeah, you were amazing," another student chimed in. Jalen's heart swelled with pride. It wasn't just the recognition for his skills, it was the way people were looking at him now. As a player. As a person. For the first time, he felt like he had earned his place. But despite all the praise, there was still a part of Jalen that remained uneasy. The bullying. It hadn't disappeared overnight. He had proven himself on the court, but the echoes of the past still haunted him. As he walked into his first class of the day, he could feel the familiar sting of being out of place. There were whispers in the back of the room, students talking, and Jalen couldn't help but wonder if they were still judging him for who he used to be. He caught sight of Brittany sitting in the front row, her eyes flickering toward him for just a second before she quickly looked away. She had always been one of the girls who had ignored him or made snide remarks. But now, he was a champion. Maybe that would change. During lunch, Jalen found himself sitting alone at the table, picking at his food as he tried to focus on his thoughts. It had been a long time since he'd sat alone in the cafeteria. He wasn't used to it anymore, especially after the night's victory. He had expected things to feel different today. To feel like he belonged. But the truth was, no matter how much recognition he was getting for his basketball skills, there was still a barrier that kept him isolated. He had earned their respect on the court, but respect off the court. That was a different game altogether. As Jalen stared down at his tray, his mind began to wander, and for the first time in weeks, he felt a familiar weight on his chest. The loneliness. The doubt. Despite everything he had overcome, there were still parts of his life that felt like a battle he hadn't quite won. He was pulled out of his thoughts by a voice he hadn't expected to hear. "Hey, Jalen," came a soft voice. Jalen looked up, surprised to see Brittany standing in front of him. She was holding a tray, her expression a little hesitant. "Mind if I sit with you?" she asked, her voice quieter than usual. Jalen blinked, unsure of what to say. Brittany had never been kind to him. She had been part of the crowd that had laughed behind his back, making him feel like an outsider. But now, here she was, offering him a seat. After a moment of hesitation, Jalen nodded. "Yeah, sure. Go ahead." Brittany sat down, placing her tray on the table. She didn't immediately say anything, just poked at her salad, clearly unsure of how to start the conversation. Jalen remained silent too, not sure what to make of the situation. Finally, after what felt like an eternity, Brittany spoke up. "I just wanted to say, that shot last night. It was incredible. You really saved the game." Jalen looked at her, surprised. He wasn't sure if he should believe her words. He'd heard similar compliments from his teammates, but hearing it from someone like Brittany was unexpected. "Thanks," Jalen said cautiously. "I'm just glad we won. I've been thinking a lot about, well, how I've treated you," Brittany continued, her eyes meeting his for the first time. "I guess I've never really taken the time to get to know you. I was wrong, Jalen. I'm sorry for the way I acted before." Jalen felt a knot tighten in his stomach. He hadn't expected an apology. Not from her. Not from anyone. But hearing her words, genuine, soft, caught him off guard. "I appreciate that," Jalen said, his voice a little shaky. "It means a lot." For the first time in a long time, Jalen felt like maybe he wasn't so alone after all. Maybe the game had been a turning point for more than just the championship. Maybe it had changed things on a deeper level, things he hadn't expected. "I want to get to know you better," Brittany said after a moment. "If you're up for it, maybe we can hang out sometime. Just talk." Jalen wasn't sure what to make of the offer. He had spent so long protecting himself, keeping his distance from people who had hurt him, that the idea of opening up to someone again felt daunting. But as he looked at Brittany's sincere expression, something in him softened. "Yeah," Jalen said, after a beat. "I think that sounds good." As the lunch bell rang and Brittany got up to leave, Jalen sat there for a moment longer, processing everything that had just happened. Maybe, just maybe, things could change. Maybe the shot he made last night wasn't just about proving himself to his team, but about proving that he had a place in this world. That he belonged. Jalen wasn't sure what the future would bring, but for the first time in a long time, he felt like he was on the right path. The game wasn't over. And neither was his journey. The days following the big game were nothing short of transformative for Jalen. For the first time, he felt the respect and admiration he had longed for, not just for his basketball skills but for who he was as a person. But, while he relished the newfound attention, he couldn't shake the feeling that things were still a bit out of place. The shift in how people saw him was undeniable, but there were still so many layers of doubt and uncertainty he needed to work through. One of the biggest surprises came in the form of Brittany. The girl who had once avoided him, laughed behind his back, and treated him like an outsider, had approached him with a sincere apology and a desire to start fresh. Jalen wasn't sure what to make of it at first, but as they spent more time together, he found himself warming up to the idea of building a new connection. Maybe there was more to her than he had originally thought. Brittany had been the first to reach out, but she wasn't the only one. It was a sunny Thursday afternoon when Jalen found himself walking through the halls, heading to his locker after school, his mind still buzzing from the conversation he had with Brittany earlier that day. They had sat together at lunch again, and it felt different. Genuine. She had been apologetic, but not in a forced way. She had simply acknowledged her past behavior, and instead of trying to make excuses, she had let him decide what came next. "Hey, Jalen," called a familiar voice from behind. Jalen turned to see Max, his teammate and one of the few people who had always been there for him, walking up with a grin on his face. "Hey, man, what's up?" Jalen replied, smiling back. Max's face lit up with excitement. "We're throwing a little celebration at my place tonight for the game. Nothing big, just a few of us from the team. You should come. You've earned it." Jalen hesitated for a moment. It wasn't that he didn't want to hang out, it was just that he wasn't used to this kind of attention outside of the basketball court. He had spent most of his life on the outskirts of things, never truly being a part of the in crowd. But now, he was being invited into a world where he wasn't just tolerated, he was wanted. "You sure?" Jalen asked. "I mean, you don't have to invite me just because of the game." Max shook his head. "No, man. You're a part of this team now. You've earned a place here. Trust me, it's not just about the shot. It's about everything you've done for the team." Jalen felt a rush of warmth spread through him. It was more than just a victory, it was the feeling that he truly belonged. "I'll be there," Jalen said, grinning. "Thanks, Max." As they parted ways, Jalen couldn't help but feel a sense of nervous excitement. He had always been an outsider, watching from the sidelines, never truly part of the group. But now, things were changing. He wasn't just the quiet kid in the back anymore. He was Jalen Carter, a key player on the Riverton High basketball team. And tonight, he was going to hang out with his teammates like he had never done before. That evening, when Jalen arrived at Max's house, he was surprised to see a few familiar faces waiting. Alex was there, along with some of the other guys from the team. The atmosphere was relaxed, the room filled with the sounds of laughter, music, and the clinking of glasses. For once, Jalen didn't feel out of place. He felt like he had earned his spot. "You made it." Max greeted him, offering a plate of snacks. Jalen accepted it, scanning the room. People were talking, joking around, but there was a sense of camaraderie he hadn't felt before. It was strange, but in a good way. Everyone seemed so comfortable with each other. There was no pressure, no judgment. It was just friends celebrating the end of a successful season. For the first time in ages, Jalen felt like he could breathe. He wasn't just a project or the guy everyone pitied. He wasn't the target of ridicule anymore. He was a part of something. A part of a team. A part of something bigger than basketball. He found a seat next to Max and Alex, who were deep in conversation about an upcoming tournament. It wasn't long before the others joined in, and the group began to talk about their favorite basketball players, upcoming college aspirations, and even the most embarrassing moments from previous games. Jalen listened more than he spoke, but he didn't feel left out. Everyone was talking to him, asking his opinion, and making him feel heard. For someone who had spent so long being invisible, this was a new and exhilarating experience. Later in the evening, as the party began to wind down, Max pulled Jalen aside. "Hey, man," Max said, his voice a little more serious now. "I know it's only been a few months, but I just want you to know that you've really changed the vibe of this team. You've taught us all something important. It's not just about the game, it's about how you handle everything else. You've made a difference, man." Jalen wasn't sure what to say. He had always kept his head down, avoided the limelight. But now, in this moment, he could feel the respect from his teammates. They weren't just impressed by his skills, they were inspired by his journey. By his determination to rise above it all. "I appreciate that, Max," Jalen said, his voice sincere. "I've learned a lot from all of you, too. This team, you guys, you've made me feel like I'm part of something. It means more than you know." Max smiled, clapping him on the shoulder. "Well, you're in now. No turning back." As Jalen stood there, listening to the quiet buzz of laughter and conversation in the background, he felt a sense of pride. Not just for what he had accomplished on the court, but for what he had done off it. He had fought for his place, earned his spot, and now, he was reaping the rewards of his hard work and perseverance. The next day at school, things felt different, more relaxed. Jalen walked through the halls with his head held high. The people who had once ignored him, the ones who had bullied him, seemed to see him now. They didn't stare as much, and there was less whispering behind his back. It wasn't perfect, but it was progress. And for Jalen, that was enough. During lunch, as he sat with Brittany, Max, and Alex, Jalen realized how much he had changed in such a short time. He wasn't just a kid from the wrong side of town anymore. He was Jalen Carter, a name people recognized, not just for his basketball skills, but for the person he had become. A teammate. A friend. Someone worthy of respect. Brittany smiled at him from across the table, her expression softer than it had ever been before. "I'm really proud of you, Jalen," she said, her voice full of warmth. "You've really come a long way." Jalen smiled back, feeling the weight of her words. "Thanks, Brittany. I couldn't have done it without all of you." It was then that Jalen realized that while he had always been striving for the recognition, the success, and the respect he had earned, the true reward was something far more valuable, the friendships and bonds he had built along the way. These were the things that would last. These were the things that made all the struggle worth it. The day after Max's celebration, things were quieter at school, but for Jalen, the excitement from the previous night still hung in the air. He had never experienced anything like that before, people seeing him, not just as the quiet kid on the sidelines, but as someone who had earned their respect. But deep down, Jalen knew the hard part was still ahead. This newfound recognition, this new version of himself, was still fragile. He had been bullied for so long that the doubts crept in whenever he felt too confident. What if it was just temporary? What if things went back to how they were? Jalen was determined to make sure they didn't. He was ready to prove to himself, once and for all, that he was more than just a basketball player. He was a person who deserved respect, who could stand his ground in a world that had always tried to push him down. The next big test came sooner than Jalen expected. The school's regional basketball tournament was fast approaching, and Riverton High was facing their toughest competition yet. The other team was well known for their brutal defense, their strategic plays, and most importantly, their star player, Tyler. Tyler was a beast on the court, and everyone knew he was one of the best players in the league. He was also known for being a bit of a bully, having a reputation for trash-talking and getting in the heads of his opponents. It was going to be a challenge, not just because of his skills but because of the mental game he played with everyone. Jalen had faced tough opponents before, but this felt different. It wasn't just about the game. This was about standing up for himself, about proving that he could handle whatever came his way. He had already shown his team that he could take the pressure. But this was going to be on another level. The team was in the locker room, preparing for their big game. Max and the guys were all talking strategy, but Jalen found himself lost in thought. He could hear the excitement and tension in the air, but his mind was elsewhere, on Tyler. He had watched Tyler play in a few games, and the guy had a way of making everyone feel small. It wasn't just about basketball. Tyler had a way of getting under your skin, making you second-guess yourself. Jalen wasn't sure if he was ready for that. "Jalen, you alright?" Alex's voice cut through his thoughts. Jalen looked up to see Alex standing in front of him, a concerned look on his face. Alex had been one of the few people who had always supported him, even before Jalen had gained the recognition he had now. But Jalen knew this was different. This game was different. The pressure was on, and everyone was counting on him. "I'm good," Jalen replied, trying to sound confident. "Just thinking about Tyler." Alex gave him a knowing look. "Yeah, I get it. Tyler's a beast. But you've got this. You've been carrying this team all season. We're all in this together. Don't let him get to you." Jalen nodded, taking a deep breath. He had been carrying the weight of his team for so long, but this was something else. This wasn't just about proving his skills. This was about proving his worth, his resilience. It was about showing the world that he wouldn't let anyone take that from him. The game began, and Jalen could feel the intensity in the air. The gym was packed, the crowd's cheers deafening, and the opposing team, led by Tyler, was already taunting them as they took the court. Jalen's heart raced as the ball was tipped off, and the game was underway. For the first few minutes, it felt like any other game. Jalen was in his zone, making smart passes, getting open looks, and playing solid defense. But then, Tyler stepped up. He was everywhere, on offense, driving to the basket, and on defense, blocking shots with ease. He was a monster on the court. And his taunts? They were personal. "Nice try, Carter," Tyler sneered as he knocked the ball away from Jalen, sending it into the stands. "You should stick to just passing. You're not cut out for the big leagues." The comment stung more than Jalen wanted to admit, but he didn't let it show. He could feel the eyes of the team on him, the pressure mounting. He had to prove that he was more than just a nice playmaker. He had to show Tyler, and everyone else, that he could handle the pressure. As the game wore on, the tension between Jalen and Tyler grew. Every time Jalen made a move, Tyler was right there, trying to get under his skin. But Jalen refused to let him win. He kept his head in the game, focusing on his plays, pushing through the mental game that Tyler was trying to play. By halftime, Riverton High was down by 8 points, and the atmosphere was tense in the locker room. The team was frustrated, but Jalen could feel the weight of the situation. They needed him. He had always been the one to lift them up when they were down. But now, he felt like he was the one who needed lifting. Max slapped him on the shoulder, breaking him out of his thoughts. "You got this, Jalen. We all know what you're capable of. Let's go out there and take this win." Jalen nodded, trying to shake off the self-doubt that was creeping in. He had been through too much to let it all slip away now. He had shown everyone he could take the hits, now it was time to hit back. The second half began with a roar from the crowd, and the game was about to get even more intense. Jalen took a deep breath, wiped the sweat from his brow, and stepped back onto the court. Tyler was right there, standing tall, looking at him with that smirk, waiting for him to make a mistake. But Jalen wasn't backing down. He was done letting others dictate his story. This was his time. The game started slow for Riverton High, but then something clicked. Jalen made a huge steal, running down the court and dishing the ball out for an open shot. The team followed suit, and soon, they had closed the gap to just 2 points. The energy in the gym was electric, and Jalen could feel the tide beginning to turn. Tyler, however, wasn't backing down either. He was still dominating, but Jalen could sense that Tyler was starting to feel the pressure. He was rattled, his confidence cracking just a bit. Jalen kept his focus, watching every move Tyler made, reading his plays like a book. With just under a minute left, the score was tied. Riverton High had possession, and Jalen knew this was his moment. He could feel the eyes of the entire gym on him, but this time, it wasn't fear he felt, it was determination. He took the ball at the top of the key, eyes fixed on Tyler. This was more than a game. This was about everything he had fought for, the respect, the strength, the belief in himself. He faked left, then drove right. Tyler bit the fake, and Jalen exploded to the basket. As he soared toward the hoop, he felt Tyler's presence behind him, but it didn't matter. He jumped, let the ball fly, and with a swish, the ball landed through the net as the buzzer went off. The crowd erupted. Riverton High had won. Jalen landed on the floor, his heart racing, but for the first time in a long while, he felt at peace. He had done it. Not just for the team, but for himself. As Jalen walked off the court, the cheers and applause washed over him, but the one thing he heard more than anything was the sound of his teammates surrounding him, lifting him up in celebration. "You did it, man!" Max shouted, grinning. "You took down Tyler. You were unstoppable out there." Jalen smiled, his chest swelling with pride. He had won the game. He had faced the challenge, and he had come out on top. Not just because of his skills, but because he had finally learned how to believe in himself. As they all walked off the court together, Jalen knew that this was just the beginning. There was still much more to prove, and he was ready for whatever came next. The victory over Tyler and his team was a game-changer for Jalen. It wasn't just about the win itself, it was about everything that came with it. The respect. The acknowledgement. The feeling of finally being seen. For the first time in a long while, Jalen felt like he was standing tall, not just on the court, but in every aspect of his life. But the days that followed weren't as simple as basking in the glory of victory. In fact, the aftermath of the game proved to be far more complicated than Jalen anticipated. The morning after the big game, Jalen walked into school feeling a strange mix of pride and nervous energy. People were talking about the game everywhere he went. Whispers filled the halls, and every now and then, Jalen caught someone's gaze, someone who had once ignored him or treated him like an outsider. Now, they were looking at him differently. And even though the recognition was what he had longed for, it felt strange. It was almost like he had stepped into a role he wasn't sure he could fully own. Jalen didn't mind the praise, but there was a part of him that felt uncomfortable with the sudden shift in attention. As he walked to his locker, he noticed Brittany talking with a group of popular girls. They were laughing, and Jalen felt a pang of doubt. Had things changed with her, too? Would she still be the same Brittany who had apologized to him, or would he now be caught up in a whirlwind of social dynamics he didn't quite understand? He tried to shake off the feeling as he grabbed his books from his locker and headed to his first class, but the thought lingered in his mind. Everything had changed so quickly. In the cafeteria, things were quieter than usual. Normally, Jalen would have sat alone at a corner table, but today he felt compelled to find a seat with his teammates. They had been talking non-stop about the game, and there was a celebratory energy in the air. As Jalen walked in, Max waved him over to their table. He couldn't help but feel a small sense of pride that he was no longer an outsider. He was a part of something. He was one of them. But as Jalen approached, he noticed the subtle shift in the dynamic. The teammates who had always been his friends, Alex, Max, and a few others, were still engaging with him, but there were a few players from other parts of the school, the ones who had never paid him much attention before, now sitting at the table, nodding their heads and offering congratulations. The atmosphere was friendly, but Jalen felt the pressure to live up to their expectations. "What's up, Carter? You really showed Tyler who's boss out there," one of the new faces said, smirking as if he were suddenly Jalen's biggest fan. Jalen smiled politely, trying to shrug off the discomfort. "Thanks. It was a team effort. Max jumped in, his voice louder. Yeah, man, it was all about the team. Jalen carried us when it counted, though. Don't forget that. The conversation carried on, but Jalen couldn't help feeling a little out of place. The respect was there, but it didn't feel earned in the same way. He had always known who his real friends were. And while he appreciated the support, he wasn't sure if the new faces at the table were really rooting for him or if they were just jumping on the bandwagon. As the day wore on, Jalen's unease only grew. The tension wasn't about the attention he was receiving, it was about the pressure to keep living up to that moment. Everyone expected him to continue being the hero, to keep delivering on the court the way he had in the big game. But Jalen knew better than anyone that he couldn't keep up the charade of being perfect all the time. He wasn't invincible. In gym class, Jalen found himself in a one-on-one matchup with Tyler again. It wasn't a full game, but the competitiveness between the two was undeniable. Tyler had clearly taken the loss personally, and now, he was out for redemption. Let's see if you can handle the pressure, Carter, Tyler taunted, a smirk spreading across his face as he dribbled past Jalen with ease. Jalen clenched his jaw, trying to focus. He wasn't going to let Tyler get to him, not now. Not after everything he had worked for. The game was intense. Tyler was playing with everything he had, pushing Jalen to his limits, but Jalen was determined not to back down. He defended hard, stealing the ball from Tyler on several occasions, but every time he got the ball, the pressure mounted. He could feel the weight of the moment. He had to prove to everyone, especially to himself, that the big game wasn't a fluke. As the game wore on, Jalen found himself getting frustrated. Tyler was relentless. He taunted, he pushed, he even tried to trip Jalen once when the referee wasn't looking. It was clear that Tyler wasn't just trying to win, he was trying to break Jalen down. But Jalen wasn't about to let him. With the game tied and only seconds left, Jalen stole the ball again, his heart racing as he dribbled toward the basket. Tyler was closing in on him, but Jalen had one last move up his sleeve. He faked left, then spun right, sending Tyler flying past him. Jalen took the shot, his body rising toward the hoop, and the ball sailed through the air, landing perfectly in the basket as the whistle blew. The gym fell silent for a moment before the room erupted into applause. Jalen stood there, breathing heavily, but with a sense of triumph that went beyond the score. He had done it. Again. Later that day, as Jalen walked home, he couldn't shake the feeling that something wasn't quite right. He had beaten Tyler in front of the whole gym, again. But this time, it felt like more than just a victory, it felt like a validation. He had proven to himself that he wasn't going to let anyone bully him, no matter how hard they tried. But it also made him realize something else. The pressure to keep up this image, the image of the strong, invincible athlete, was starting to weigh on him. People expected him to keep winning. People expected him to always be the one who could handle the pressure. But what about when he wasn't perfect? What about when he didn't have it all together? Jalen wasn't sure what to do with all these new feelings. He wasn't sure if he was ready to carry all the expectations of his new reputation. But one thing was clear, he had come too far to back down now. As he reached his front door, Jalen paused and looked out over the neighborhood. For the first time in his life, he felt like he was standing at the edge of something huge. He had overcome so much to get here, but the hardest part was yet to come. The journey wasn't over. And the hardest part of all was learning how to be true to himself, no matter the expectations or the pressure that others placed on him. It had been a week since Jalen's second showdown with Tyler, and the buzz around school hadn't died down. If anything, it had intensified. Every day, he was greeted with high fives, handshakes, and excited chatter about his performance. But the recognition, while flattering, only seemed to grow heavier. Jalen found himself stuck in a place he hadn't expected, fame wasn't as sweet as he thought. At night, when the crowds were gone and the cheers had faded, Jalen was left with his thoughts, and that was when the doubts crept in. The more people told him how great he was, the more he started questioning if he could keep up the persona. The weight of expectation was sinking in, and with it came a new fear: what if he wasn't good enough anymore? What if his next game was a flop? It wasn't long before the doubts began to affect his performance on the court. During practice, Jalen found himself hesitating. In previous games, he had been fearless, he trusted his skills, his instincts. But now, every time he dribbled past a defender or went for a shot, he felt like there were 100 eyes on him, waiting for him to fail. Max noticed the change immediately. "Hey, Jalen," Max said after practice one afternoon, pulling him aside. "What's going on with you lately? You're playing off. You're usually on fire, but today it's like you're not even there." Jalen couldn't find the words at first. The truth was that he wasn't sure what was happening either. His body was there, but his mind kept drifting. He had always felt like basketball was his escape, his place of freedom. But now, it felt like every move he made was scrutinized. "I don't know," Jalen admitted after a long silence. I don't know if I can keep doing this. What if I mess up? What if the next game is a disaster? Everyone's expecting me to be perfect, and I just don't know if I can be that guy." Max's expression softened, and he placed a hand on Jalen's shoulder. "Man, nobody's expecting you to be perfect. Not even you. You've already proven yourself more than anyone could have imagined. The only person putting pressure on you is you. Don't forget why you play this game in the first place. It's not about pleasing others. It's about doing what you love. And you love basketball." Jalen swallowed hard, the weight of Max's words sinking in. Max was right. He had always played for himself. His love for the game had driven him through the tough times, not the desire for praise or recognition. But now, with all the attention, it felt like he had lost sight of that. "I don't know, man," Jalen said, looking down at his feet. "What if I can't handle it? What if I don't belong up there with everyone else?" Max shook his head, his voice firm. "Jalen, you've been through hell and back to get here. You belong more than anyone else. The fact that you're even questioning it shows how much you care. But you have to trust yourself. Just play like you always have. Forget the hype. Play for you." The words stuck with Jalen long after practice ended. As he sat on the bleachers that evening, watching his teammates joke and laugh, he felt a sense of isolation creeping in. Everyone saw him as the guy who could do no wrong, the guy who could carry the team to victory. But he wasn't sure if he could live up to that anymore. He was just a kid trying to figure things out, just like everyone else. The next morning at school, Jalen tried to shake off his doubts. But walking through the hallways, he couldn't escape the feeling that every eye was on him. Every time he passed someone, there was a hushed conversation, a pointed glance. Even Brittany, who had been kind to him in the past, seemed to be giving him an odd look. At lunch, as Jalen sat down with his friends, he could feel the weight of their stares. They were all proud of him, sure, but he felt like he was wearing a label he didn't ask for. The basketball star. The title seemed like a curse, not a blessing. He wasn't sure if anyone cared about who he really was anymore, just that he could play a game and win. "Jalen, you good?" Alex asked, noticing the tension in his posture. Jalen forced a smile, trying to brush it off. "Yeah, man. Just tired, you know. The usual stuff." But Alex wasn't buying it. He leaned in closer, his voice lower. "Listen, I get it. I saw you in practice. You're not yourself. And I know it's a lot of pressure, but you can't keep bottling it up. You've got to talk about it." Jalen didn't want to open up, not in front of everyone, but the weight of the moment pressed down on him. It felt like everyone wanted a piece of him, and he didn't know how much more of himself he could give. So, he exhaled, his voice barely a whisper. "I don't know how to do this anymore, Alex. The pressure. The people. Everything. I'm just tired of pretending like it's all okay. Alex didn't say anything at first. He just gave Jalen a steady look, then nodded as if he understood exactly what was going on. Hey, listen. It's okay to not be okay. Nobody's expecting you to be perfect. What you've done already is incredible. But you've got to find balance. You don't have to carry the weight of everyone's expectations. You've got us. You've got me. And that's all you need. Jalen felt a small knot in his chest loosen. Maybe Alex was right. Maybe he didn't have to carry all of this by himself. That night, as Jalen sat alone in his room, he thought about everything that had happened. He had always been afraid of being seen, of standing out. And now, it felt like his every move was under a microscope. But maybe the problem wasn't with other people's expectations, it was with his own. He had always been his harshest critic. Every mistake, every missed shot, every time he didn't perform as expected, it haunted him. But what if he didn't have to be perfect? What if he could just be himself? Jalen lay back on his bed, staring at the ceiling. For the first time in a long time, he allowed himself to just breathe. The pressure was still there, but now, he had a choice. He could let it crush him, or he could rise above it. Tomorrow would be another game, another challenge. But for the first time in a while, Jalen felt ready to face it, not because he had to, but because he wanted to. For himself. The following week, Jalen found himself standing at the edge of a new challenge, one that had nothing to do with Tyler, with school bullies, or even with the pressure of being a star athlete. It was a challenge of the mind. It was about how he chose to see himself in this new world, and whether he could carry the weight of everyone's expectations without losing himself in the process. That Wednesday afternoon, Coach Johnson called the team together after practice. The team huddled on the court, still sweaty from drills, exchanging tired glances as they waited for Coach's usual pep talk. But this time, there was something different in the air. Coach was unusually quiet, pacing back and forth in front of them. "All right, listen up," Coach Johnson began, his voice steady, but there was an edge to it. "Tomorrow, we've got a big game against Oak Ridge High. It's going to be tough, but you've all shown me what you're capable of. Jalen, especially, you've proven you can handle the heat." Jalen shifted uncomfortably. The last thing he wanted was to be singled out again. But the eyes of his teammates all seemed to turn toward him, awaiting a response. The expectation, once again, was palpable. "I'm ready," Jalen said quietly, though his voice didn't carry the usual confidence. Coach Johnson nodded, then paused. "Good. But here's the thing. Tomorrow, I don't need you to be the hero. I don't need you to carry the team on your shoulders. I need you to be a part of the team. We win together, or we lose together. You're a great player, Jalen, but right now, I need you to trust your teammates just as much as you trust yourself. That's how we win." The weight of Coach's words landed heavy on Jalen. It was the first time in weeks that someone had told him not to try to do it all himself. Not to be perfect. Jalen nodded slowly, his mind racing. He could feel his anxiety, his doubts, start to shift. Maybe Coach was right. Maybe it wasn't about being flawless on the court, it was about working as one, as a unit. The next day, the gym was buzzing with excitement as the team prepared for their game against Oak Ridge High. The stands were packed, and Jalen could hear the familiar sounds of the crowd echoing in his chest. He had always loved the rush of the game, the sounds of sneakers squeaking on the hardwood, the bounce of the ball, the cheers and groans from the crowd. But today felt different. The usual nervous energy was still there, but it had a new edge to it. This time, he wasn't focused solely on proving himself. This time, he was focused on winning, for the team. Coach's words echoed in his mind as he laced up his shoes. Trust your teammates. Don't try to be the hero. Jalen had always believed he had to be the star, the one to carry the weight of every game on his shoulders. But what if the key to winning wasn't about being the best player on the court? What if it was about working together? For the first time, Jalen was truly thinking about the team, not just himself. The game was fast-paced, full of back-and-forth moments. Oak Ridge was a strong team, but Jalen felt a fire inside him that he hadn't felt in a while. As the game went on, he started to notice something. When he passed the ball, his teammates responded. Max hit a three-pointer. Alex made a beautiful layup. And it wasn't just about the points, it was the way the team was flowing. Everyone was feeding off each other's energy, and Jalen could feel it. It wasn't about him being the star anymore, it was about everyone playing their part. Midway through the third quarter, Jalen's moment came. He was driving toward the basket, his man on his heels. He could have gone for the easy layup, taken the shot himself. But instead, he saw Alex wide open in the corner. Without hesitation, he passed the ball, trusting that Alex would make the shot. Alex caught the ball and didn't hesitate. He sank the three-pointer, and the crowd erupted into cheers. Jalen's heart soared. It wasn't about the shot, it was about the trust. Jalen had made the right choice, and it had paid off. His teammates were stepping up, and he was part of something bigger than just his individual game. As the game clock wound down, the score was tight, and Jalen could feel the adrenaline surge through his body. The crowd was on their feet, chanting for their team. With just seconds left, the ball was in Jalen's hands once again. This time, he didn't hesitate. He was going for it. But as he drove toward the basket, he saw something that almost made him stop. Tyler, yes, Tyler, was there, standing at the edge of the paint, eyes locked on Jalen. It was the moment he had been waiting for, the moment where he could prove he had finally won. But instead of rushing for the shot, Jalen paused. He remembered Coach's words, "Don't try to be the hero." With a swift move, Jalen spun around and passed the ball, this time to Max, who was waiting on the other side of the court. Max caught the ball with barely a second to spare, shooting it up as the buzzer went off. The ball soared through the air and landed perfectly in the net. The crowd erupted. The team exploded in cheers as the scoreboard lit up with the final score, 67-65. They had done it. They had won. As the team celebrated, Jalen found himself standing in the middle of the court, a smile slowly spreading across his face. The pressure was gone. For the first time in weeks, he felt free. He hadn't carried the team. They had all carried each other. Coach Johnson came up to him, clapping him on the back. "You did it, Jalen. You trusted them, and they trusted you. That's the key to being a great player." Jalen's chest swelled with pride, not from the victory, but from the realization that he didn't need to do it alone. His team was just as capable, just as strong. He wasn't the only one who could make the game-winning play. Later that night, as Jalen sat in his room, he reflected on everything that had happened. The doubts, the fears, the pressure, they had all melted away. The game hadn't been won by one person. It had been won by the whole team. And that's how they were going to continue winning, not by trying to be perfect, but by playing together. As he looked out of his window, he finally understood what it meant to trust others, and to trust himself. He wasn't just a basketball player. He was a part of something much bigger. He had found his place, not as the star, but as a teammate. Jalen didn't need to carry the world on his shoulders. He just needed to play the game he loved, and trust the people around him to help him do it. Tomorrow, they would do it again. Together. The victory against Oak Ridge High had been sweet, but as Coach Johnson always said, one win doesn't mean anything if you can't back it up. The team was riding high, but Jalen knew they were facing an even bigger challenge now. Tomorrow's game against North Valley was the one everyone had been talking about for weeks. It was the game that could make or break their season. As Jalen sat in the locker room, the sound of his teammates gearing up around him echoed through the space. He could feel the tension in the air. The stakes were higher than ever. This was the moment. They had to prove they weren't just a fluke. This wasn't just about skill. This was about heart, teamwork, and grit. Max sat beside Jalen, tightening his sneakers. "This is it, man. Everything we've been working for. You ready?" Jalen didn't reply immediately. His mind was racing. He remembered the doubts he'd had, the pressure that had weighed him down. But today was different. He had learned to trust his teammates, and he knew they'd learn to trust him, too. It wasn't about one person being the hero. It was about working together. "I'm ready," Jalen said, his voice steady. "Let's do this." The arena was packed when they arrived. The crowd was electric, their cheers filling the air as the teams took the court. North Valley was the top contender in the league, and their reputation was legendary. But Jalen wasn't focused on the other team. He wasn't thinking about how much they had to prove or how perfect this game needed to be. He was thinking about his team. He was thinking about the connection they had built over the past few weeks, the trust they had forged. When the game began, it felt like everything was moving at 100 miles an hour. North Valley was fast, aggressive, and skilled. They were relentless. But so were they. Jalen felt a fire inside him, a sense of purpose he hadn't felt before. Every pass, every shot, every move felt like it mattered more than ever. This wasn't just about basketball. This was about everything they had worked for. By halftime, the score was neck and neck. North Valley had the edge by just a few points, but Jalen knew they weren't out of it yet. The team was still hungry, still fighting. The locker room was filled with an intensity Jalen had never felt before. "All right, we're doing great, but we need to keep pushing," Coach Johnson said, his voice calm but firm. "We've got one half left. Remember what I told you. We're not here to play for the scoreboard. We're here to play for each other. Stay focused. Stay together." Jalen looked around at his teammates. Max, Alex, and even Tyler, who had proven to be a valuable asset on defense, every one of them was in this together. The trust they had built wasn't just a tactic on the court. It had become something more. It was a bond, a sense of brotherhood. And that was going to get them through the second half. The second half was a battle. North Valley came out strong, pushing their advantage and showing why they were undefeated. Every time Jalen thought they were closing the gap, North Valley hit another shot, or made a play that left the crowd roaring. But Jalen didn't give up. He kept pushing. He kept looking for the open man, playing the game he loved, and trusting his teammates to make the big plays when it mattered. The final minutes of the game were a blur. North Valley had the lead, but Jalen could feel something stirring inside him. There was a moment, one single moment, where everything aligned. He was standing at the top of the key, dribbling the ball, scanning the court. Max was on the wing, wide open. Tyler was cutting to the basket, and Alex was lurking on the other side. But Jalen didn't pass. This time, it was his turn. With the shot clock winding down, Jalen made his move. He faked left, dribbled right, and then took the shot, a three-pointer from the top of the arc, just beyond the line. Time seemed to stand still as the ball soared through the air, spinning toward the hoop. The entire gym fell silent. Swish. The crowd erupted into a frenzy, but Jalen didn't hear it. He didn't hear anything. For a brief moment, it was just him, the ball, and the basket. He had made the shot. He had done it. And just like that, the game was tied. But it wasn't over yet. The clock was ticking down, and North Valley still had time to answer. With only seconds left, North Valley had the ball. Jalen's heart raced as he lined up for the final play. He knew this wasn't just about skill, it was about keeping his cool. About trusting his instincts. North Valley's point guard dribbled up the court, surveying the defense. The ball was passed to their star player, who was known for making clutch shots. Jalen stayed focused, his legs bent, his eyes locked on his opponent. There was no room for doubt, no room for hesitation. As the star player launched the ball for the final shot, Jalen leaped into the air, hands outstretched, blocking the shot just as the buzzer sounded. The ball flew harmlessly off the backboard, and the game was over. The gym exploded with cheers as the buzzer went off. The scoreboard read 72-71 in their favor. Jalen collapsed to his knees on the court, breathing heavily. He could hear his teammates roaring with excitement, rushing to celebrate, but for a moment, he was lost in the rush of emotion. It wasn't just the win. It was everything that had led to this moment. The struggles, the doubts, the pressure, everything had come together in that final shot. He had trusted his team, and his team had trusted him. And they had won. In the locker room, the celebration was wild. Jalen's teammates were laughing, shouting, slapping him on the back. Max pulled him into a hug. "You did it, man. You were incredible. That last shot, insane." Jalen's chest swelled with pride. "We did it. All of us. This is what it's all about." Coach Johnson smiled as he stood at the doorway, watching the celebration unfold. "I told you," he said with a grin. "It's not about one player. It's about the team. You guys proved that tonight." As Jalen left the locker room, he looked up at the sky. The night air was cool, and for the first time in weeks, he felt at peace. The weight of expectation had lifted. The pressure was gone. He hadn't needed to be perfect. He hadn't needed to carry the team. He had just needed to be himself, and to trust the people around him. Tomorrow, they would do it all again. But tonight, Jalen had learned the greatest lesson of all. Sometimes, the real victory isn't in the scoreboard, it's in the way you rise up, together, against every challenge life throws at you. The championship game had arrived. Jalen could feel the weight of it pressing down on his chest as he sat in the locker room, lacing up his sneakers. It was more than just another game. It was the culmination of everything he had worked for, everything the team had worked for. It wasn't just about winning. It was about proving to himself, to his teammates, and to everyone who had doubted him, that they could achieve greatness together. Jalen had come a long way since that first practice, when the court felt like a place to escape from the bullying and pain he felt outside. Now, the court was where he felt most alive. Where he felt like he belonged. And it wasn't just because of his skills. It was because of the people standing beside him. His teammates, Max, Alex, Tyler, Coach Johnson, had become his family. They had been with him through the toughest times, and now, they were standing at the brink of something incredible. The locker room was quieter than usual. The team was focused, their eyes sharp, their movements quick as they prepared for the game ahead. But Jalen could sense the nervous energy. The stakes were high. The pressure was on. Coach Johnson walked into the room, his expression serious but calm. "All right, team," he began, his voice strong. "This is it. The final game. The one we've all been working for. But here's the thing, you don't have to do it alone. You've got each other. And that's what's going to get us through this." Jalen's heart swelled with pride. The words were simple, but they meant everything. They weren't just a team, they were a unit. A family. Jalen stood up, his body tense with anticipation. The adrenaline was already starting to build. "We've come this far. Let's make it count." Coach Johnson smiled, giving him a nod of approval. "Exactly. Now, let's go out there and play our game. And remember, win or lose, it's about how we play together." The atmosphere in the arena was electric as Jalen and his teammates took the court. The stands were packed, the crowd roaring with excitement. North Valley was a formidable opponent, but today, Jalen didn't feel intimidated. The pressure, which had once been a heavy weight on his shoulders, now felt like fuel. He was ready. As the game began, everything clicked into place. The team moved with a rhythm that felt almost effortless. They passed the ball with precision, set up plays with confidence, and communicated without hesitation. It wasn't just about individual moments of brilliance anymore, it was about teamwork. It was about trust. Jalen found himself in the zone. His mind was clear. The ball felt light in his hands as he dribbled, passed, and shot with a fluidity he had never known. But this wasn't about him. It was about the whole team. He passed to Max, who hit a three-pointer. He set up Alex for an easy layup. Tyler played aggressive defense, shutting down their opponents at every turn. Every player contributed in ways that were both expected and unexpected. As the game wore on, the tension grew. North Valley was a great team, but the longer the game went, the more Jalen felt a shift. They weren't just playing for the trophy, they were playing for each other. Every pass, every block, every shot, it was all part of the same goal. With just a few minutes left in the fourth quarter, the score was neck and neck. The gym was buzzing, the crowd chanting, "Let's go, Kings." Their school, their town, everyone had come out to watch. This was more than a game. It was a statement. With 30 seconds left, the game was tied. Jalen stood at the top of the key, the ball in his hands. He could feel his heartbeat in his chest, but his mind was clear. He wasn't thinking about the pressure, the crowd, or the trophy. He was thinking about his teammates. He looked at Max, who was positioned for a potential shot. He looked at Alex, who was sprinting to the basket. Tyler was on defense, moving fast, his eyes focused. But it wasn't just the play that mattered. It was the trust. Jalen had come to realize that the game wasn't about one person making the big play, it was about everyone doing their part. And that's how they had made it this far. As the clock ticked down, Jalen dribbled to the left, faked a shot, and passed the ball to Max, who was wide open for the three. The crowd held its breath as the ball left Max's hands. It soared through the air in a perfect arc, and time seemed to slow down as the ball spun toward the hoop. Swish! The crowd erupted into a deafening roar. The scoreboard flashed, Kings 78, North Valley 75. The final buzzer sounded, and Jalen collapsed to the court, a grin spreading across his face. His teammates swarmed him, lifting him up, cheering, hugging, and shouting. They had done it. They had won the championship. But it wasn't just the victory that felt so incredible, it was the journey. The way they had come together, the way they had learned to trust each other, to push through the hard times and the doubts. They hadn't just won a game. They had won something bigger, they had won respect, they had won themselves. In the locker room, Coach Johnson stood in the doorway, his arms crossed, watching the celebration unfold. He had always believed in the team, but now he saw the result of that belief. All right, he shouted, grinning. You guys earned this. But remember this, it's not just about what we did tonight. It's about the way we got here. You guys grew. You came together. And that's what makes you champions. Jalen sat down on the bench, his hands on his knees. The adrenaline was wearing off, and the full weight of the moment was starting to sink in. He had been through so much, being bullied, doubted, and constantly pushed to prove himself. But none of that mattered anymore. This wasn't about proving people wrong. This was about proving to himself that he could be something greater than he ever thought possible. He looked around at his teammates, his family, and smiled. They had all been through this journey together. They had faced the highs and the lows, and now they were champions. But more importantly, they had found something much more valuable than a trophy, they had found a sense of belonging, a sense of trust, and a sense of purpose. The next day, the town celebrated the victory. It felt like the whole community had come together to honor the team. Jalen and his teammates were the stars of the show, but as they stood there, smiling for the camera, Jalen realized that the true legacy wasn't the trophy. It was the impact they had made on each other's lives. The way they had supported each other, lifted each other up, and believed in each other, even when no one else did. And as he looked out over the crowd, Jalen knew one thing for sure, this was just the beginning. Hit subscribe and leave a comment with where you're watching from. This story might just spark a new beginning. What's one thing that always pushes you forward, even when things get tough?